Tonight, we're diving into 28 random Harry Potter lore facts. There are a few important threads to follow, but I'll keep the pacing soft so you can still drift off comfortably. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Think about the first time you stepped through the doors of the Great Hall or caught a glimpse of the shifting staircases that seem to possess a mind of their own. We often treat the wizarding world as a place of pure whimsy, a playground of charms and chocolate frogs. But beneath that surface layer of magic lies a foundation built on ancient myth, complex social hierarchies, and a history that is far more grounded in our own reality than it might first appear. The lore of Harry Potter isn't just a collection of cool details, it is a meticulously constructed mirror of the human experience, reflecting our deepest fears, our most stubborn prejudices, and our enduring hope. When we look at the names etched into the family trees of the Sacred 28, or the Latin roots of a common hex, we aren't just looking at world building. We are looking at a language of symbolism where every syllable carries weight and every historical event echoes the tensions of the real world. The stakes of understanding this world go far beyond simply winning a trivia night. To understand the lore is to understand the soul of the story. Why does the Hogwarts Express, a Victorian steam engine, serve as the primary link between the magical and the mundane? Why is the number 7 woven so tightly into the fabric of magical lore and destiny? These aren't accidents. They represent the friction between a hidden society trying to preserve its traditions and a rapidly changing world that threatens to expose them. When we talk about the Ministry of Magic, we aren't just talking about a government. We're looking at a satirical critique of bureaucracy, how easily institutions can become cold, indifferent, or even complicit in darkness when they value order over justice. The lore provides the context for why Harry's journey matters, showing us that the battle against Voldemort wasn't just a fight between two wizards, but a clash of ideologies that had been simmering for centuries. There is a profound mystery at the heart of the castle itself. Hogwarts is described as one of the most ancient and heavily protected locations in the magical world, yet it remains a labyrinth of secrets that even the headmaster doesn't fully grasp. How much of the school is actually alive? Is the castle merely a vessel for magic, or does it have its own agency, choosing when to reveal its passages and when to hide them? This same mystery in the way magic interacts with the mind. Consider the Dementors, beings that don't just cause fear, but physically manifest the sensation of clinical depression, draining every happy memory until only the worst experiences remain. The lore tells us these creatures aren't just monsters in the woods, they are externalizations of internal trauma. By examining the origins of these beings and the etymology of the names we've grown to love, we begin to see a pattern. How a character's destiny is often hidden in plain sight, buried in a star chart or a botanical dictionary. As we move through these 28 facts, we are going to peel back the layers of the wizarding world. We will look at the architectural quirks of a school that refuses to stay still, and the political machinations of a ministry that often forgets who it is supposed to serve. We will explore how the smallest details, the wood of a wand, the ingredients in a first-year potion, or the birthday of a twin, all serve to deepen the narrative and connect the characters to a legacy much larger than themselves. This is a journey through the hidden corners of the library and the forgotten corridors of history, where we find that the magic isn't just in the spells, but in the stories we tell about where they came from. The depth of this universe is what allows it to feel so tangible. It's why we still debate the morality of the house system, and why we feel a pang of recognition when the floral symbolism in a professor's final words. It is a world where the line between the mythic and the mundane is constantly blurred, where a train station in London can be the gateway to a different life, and where a name like Sirius can tell you everything you need to know about a man's heart before he even speaks. We are stepping into a space where every detail matters, where history is alive, and where the shadows of the past are always reaching out to touch the present. Let's begin this deep dive into the mechanics, the myths, and the many secrets of the wizarding world. Hogwarts is not a building. It is a living creature, one that breathes and shifts and remembers. Every stone in its walls holds a quiet pulse. Every doorway is a decision waiting to be made, and every staircase is a spine that refuses to stay still. The castle functions as a sentient magical entity with shifting internal geography, and this is not metaphor or poetic exaggeration. It is a literal truth woven into its foundations. When the founders first conjured the school from the Scottish Highlands, they did not simply stack stones and enchant them. They awakened something. They gave the castle a will of its own, a will that has only grown more intricate over 1,000 years. 142 staircases move of their own volition, reflecting the school's medieval-modern hybridity in the most literal way possible. Some are broad and grand, carved from ancient granite that remembers the weight of armoured boots. Others are narrow, trembling things that spiral into corners you cannot find twice. They shift not out of chaos, but out of purpose. They respond to the castle's own sense of timing, and that timing is tied to the rhythms of Hogwarts life. A staircase might choose to lead you to a classroom on Monday morning, and then on Tuesday, it might refuse to move at all, waiting until a particular student passes by. There is no logic that can be mapped, only a living intelligence that decides who goes where. The result is a geography that is never quite the same twice, a school that forces its inhabitants to stay alert, to learn the language of the building itself. Yes, and then there are the secret passages. The castle hides them like secrets held in the palm of a closed hand. Some are simple shortcuts between towers. Others, like the One-Eyed Witch Tunnel, bridge the gap between education and rebellion. That tunnel, hidden behind a statue of a witch with a hump on her back and a single working eye, was not built by accident. It leads straight to the cellar of Honeyduke's sweet shop in Hogsmeade, and it is the kind of passage that exists for exactly one purpose: to let students break the rules. The castle knows that rules are part of its ecosystem. It provides the tools for rebellion, because rebellion is part of growing up. Hogwarts does not judge. It simply makes room for every kind of journey, including the ones that are not on the official curriculum. But the most extraordinary architectural manifestation of student need is the room of requirement. It is not a room that was designed, it is a room that emerges. It appears when a person is in genuine need, and it becomes exactly what that person needs it to be. A place to hide, a place to practice, a place to store things you never want found. The room of requirement acts as the ultimate architectural manifestation of student need because it is not limited by the imagination of its creators. It is a space that responds directly to the unconscious desires of the person standing before it. That is not simple magic. That is the castle listening. Hogwarts has learned over the centuries that its students are not fixed, that their needs change by the hour, and it has built a room that changes with them. This is what makes Hogwarts feel so deeply alive. It is not a static backdrop for a story. It is a character in its own right, one with moods and preferences and a sense of humour. The staircases that lead you astray are not malfunctions, they are jokes. The secret passages are not oversights, they are invitations. And the room of requirement is not a convenience, it is a confession that the castle knows what you truly want, even when you do not say it aloud. And yet, for all its ancient intelligence, Hogwarts is also a modern institution. It runs on a schedule, it admits students by letter, and it is connected to the rest of Wizarding Britain by something that could not be less magical: a steam engine. The journey that brings students to this living castle begins on a platform that does not exist for Muggles. And in that train, the Hogwarts Express, carries with it a story of compromise between the magical world and the world of steam and steel. It is a story that reveals how the wizarding world depends on Muggle invention, even as it pretends otherwise. But that is a story for the next chapter, because the train is not the castle, and the castle does not need machines to breathe. It only needs you to walk its halls and let it decide where you belong. From that shifting geography of moving staircases and sentient stone, we step now to the rails, because even the most ancient castle needs a way to bring its students there. And that journey, the one millions of readers know by heart, the red steam engine pulling into a hidden platform, was born from one of the most extraordinary feats of mass magical coordination ever attempted. The Hogwarts Express, for all its cosy charm, was a logistical nightmare that required the largest mass memory charm in wizarding history. You see, before the train, students arrived at Hogwarts by any means they could manage. Portkeys scattered across the countryside, entire families apparating at odd angles, broomsticks trailing through the mist, even the occasional thestral-drawn carriage for the old guard. It was chaos, pure and simple. The Ministry of Magic, ever the bureaucratic overseer of wizarding Britain, watched the chaos grow each September the 1st, and they realised something had to change. They needed a single, reliable and centralised system, and that meant adopting a piece of Muggle technology that most pureblood families found deeply distasteful: the steam locomotive. The pureblood families initially protested the use of a Muggle steam contraption for transport. To them, it was a filthy, noisy and common machine, a symbol of the very world they tried to distance themselves from. How could the proud heirs of Slytherin and the ancient houses of the Sacred 28 be ferried to school in something built by non-magical hands? Letters of outrage flooded the ministry, and some families threatened to keep their children home rather than submit to such indignity. But the ministry, under the leadership of the then Minister for Magic, stood firm. They forcibly requisitioned the train, seized a stretch of Muggle track, and began the monumental task of making the Hogwarts Express a reality. The memory of that entire operation had to be wiped from hundreds of Muggles who witnessed the sudden appearance of a steam engine, the construction of a hidden platform, and the thousands of children vanishing into thin air. It was a coordinated obliviation of breathtaking scale, perhaps the largest single use of mass memory modification in the history of the British magical community. And yet, the train became so beloved that within a few years, even the staunchest pure-blood families forgot their protests. The Hogwarts Express was no longer a Muggle thing. It was a magical institution, a rite of passage, a symbol of the threshold between two worlds. That threshold is platform 9 3/4. It serves as the definitive liminal space between the mundane and the magical. You step through the brick wall at King's Cross Station. Again, everything changes. The platform is not just a train station, it is a boundary, a place where Muggleborns take their first terrified step into the unknown, where purebloods meet their peers, where goodbyes are said and adventures begin. The very architecture of the platform, neither fully Muggle London nor fully magical Hogwarts, mirrors the castle itself. Both spaces are caught between identities, perpetually in transition. The Hogwarts Express, that proud steam engine, is the vessel that carries you across that liminal space, from one world to the next, 7 times a year for 7 years. And when you think about the names behind the people who ride that train, their stories are just as layered as the journey itself. Which brings us to the next chapter, the etymology of the star-crossed, where we unravel how the brightest stars in the wizarding sky got their names and why they were fated to burn so brightly. The Hogwarts Express rolled through the British countryside on that first day of September, carrying children who had no idea they were riding a secret compromise, a Muggle steam engine turned magical. But the train itself is only one layer of the world's hidden meanings. Tonight, we turn to the stars themselves, and to one name that burns brighter than most. You might not think of a name as a prison or a prophecy, but in the Black family, a name was both. The Blacks were one of the oldest pure bloodlines, and they marked their children with the constellations as if branding them with the heaven's own approval. Every generation, a new name pulled from the sky: Andromeda, Bellatrix, Regulus, Sirius. But these were not random choices. They were assertions of superiority, as if the family had claimed the stars as their personal crest. To be a Black was to be born under a celestial banner, and to bear that name was to carry the weight of their obsessions. Now, take that name, Sirius. In the night sky, Sirius is the brightest star in the constellation Canis Major, which in Latin means the greater dog. That's the first layer, the dog star. But Rowling didn't stop there. She named Sirius Black, and then she gave him the ability to transform into a massive black dog. His animagus form is not a random animal. It is a literal translation of his star, a living embodiment of the celestial name. The animagus transformation is already rare, but for Sirius it's almost poetic inevitability. But the name does more than just match his fur, or it foreshadows his entire role in the story. The dog star shines brightly, but it also follows the hunter, Orion, across the sky. Orion is another constellation, and it happens to be the name of Sirius's father. So the dog star, Sirius, is eternally following Orion. And in the books, Sirius Black spends years following Harry from the shadows, watching over him, guarding him even when he can't be seen. He is the faithful dog, the loyal guardian, the star that never truly leaves its charge. The name is a hidden script for his fate. That kind of layered naming is a hallmark of this universe. A name is never just a label. It's a clue, a warning, a promise. And Sirius is one of the clearest examples, because his name works on two levels at once: astronomical and narrative. But he is not the only one whose name carries the weight of an older tongue. Soon we'll meet another man, whose very name is a curse spoken in Latin, a reminder that the wolf is never far from the moon. That story is waiting just ahead, and it begins with a boy who was bitten long before he ever stepped onto the Hogwarts Express. The Black family tradition of naming children after constellations was not merely aesthetic. It was a declaration of celestial superiority, a way of etching their bloodline into the night sky. Sirius, the dog star, burned brightest in that constellation of pure blood pride. But there is another name in the Marauder era that carries its own constellation of meaning, one that points not to the heavens, but to the earth, to the forest, to the howl that echoes through the dark. Remus Lupin. The name itself is a confession, a riddle written in plain sight before the reader ever meets the man with the patched robes and the weary eyes. The name Remus invokes the Roman myth of brothers raised by a wolf. Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of Rome, suckled by a she-wolf after being abandoned on the banks of the Tiber. That story has always been about dual nature, the wild and the civil, the beast and the builder. Remus in the myth was the more impulsive of the two, the one who scoffed at walls and boundaries. And in Remus Lupin, that same tension lives. He is gentle, bookish, kind. He is also, once a month, something beyond his control, something that tears and runs under the moon. The name hints at that fracture from the very first page, but then there is Lupin. It derives from the Latin meaning of a wolf, always making his identity an open secret. Rowling might as well have named him Wolf Wolfsbane. It is not subtle. It is a label, a brand, a quiet confession slipped into a surname so that those who know Latin, those who know myth, those who pay attention can read the truth before he ever speaks it. The name is a kindness and a cruelty. It tells us who he is, but it also locks him into that identity, into the curse that defines and isolates him. And yet, for all the clarity of that naming, the tragedy of lycanthropy in the wizarding world is not just a physical transformation. It is a social infection, a mark that spreads through rumour, through fear, through the way people look at him. Lupin is not just a werewolf. He is a werewolf who passes for human, which makes him dangerous in a different way. He threatens the neat categories society builds. He is not safe because he looks safe. The prejudice against werewolves is not about the moon. It is about the suspicion that the wolf is always there, waiting beneath the skin. And then there is the other name, the name that haunts Lupin's past, Fenrir Greyback. Fenrir, in Norse mythology, is the monstrous wolf, child of Loki, destined to kill Odin during Ragnarok. He is not a guardian, not a founder, not a tragic figure. He is pure destruction, the wolf that breaks chains and swallows gods. Greyback lives up to that myth. He does not see lycanthropy as a curse. He sees it as a weapon, a tool to infect, to tear down, to turn children into monsters. He is the opposite of Lupin in every way. One fights the wolf inside, one becomes it. These linguistic markers highlight the tragedy of lycanthropy as a social and physical infection. The names are not just clever wordplay, they are maps of pain. They tell us that lycanthropy is a disease of identity, something that can be whispered in a surname, something that can mark a man for life before he even speaks. And yet, Lupin carries that name with a quiet dignity, even as it betrays him. But there is another name in the story, one that hides its meaning not in Latin but in flowers, in grief, in the language of the dead. That story belongs to a man who teaches potions, who brews bitterness and longing into every syllable. The name Severus Snape has its own cipher, a floral riddle that waits to be decoded, and that is where we will turn next. And then there is Severus Snape, a name that carries its own weight of hidden meaning. Severus is Latin for stern or harsh, fitting for a man who never smiles in the classroom. Snape itself is an Old English word for a harsh rebuke or a cutting remark. But the deepest secret in Snape's first appearance is not in his name. It is in the very first words he speaks to Harry Potter. In the very first potions lesson, before Harry has even sat down, Snape fires a question. "Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry does not know. Nobody in the class knows. It seems like a cruel trick, a way to humiliate the boy who lived on day one. But ruling was never that simple. This is not a random question. It is a coded message written in the language of Victorian flower symbolism. In that era, flowers were used to convey emotions that could not be spoken aloud. Each bloom carried a specific meaning, and the combination of flowers could tell a secret story. Asphodel is a type of lily. In the language of flowers, it means, "My regrets follow you to the grave." Wormwood, meanwhile, symbolizes bitter absence and deep sorrow. Together, the two ingredients create a potion called the Draught of Living Death, a powerful sleeping potion that induces a state so deep it resembles death. But the floral meaning is the true message. My regrets follow you to the grave, and I live in bitter sorrow over your absence. Snape is speaking to Lily. He is speaking in a language he never learned aloud, but one he mastered in hopes of understanding her. Lily was a Muggle born, but she loved flowers. Her name is a flower after all. Snape, the half-blood boy from a broken home, picked up flower meanings as a way into her world. And here, years later, he uses that same language to address her son, who has her eyes. It is a confession that no one else can hear. He regrets the words he said to her in anger, the word mudblood that shattered their friendship. He regrets that she died and that he could not protect her. He lives with the bitter absence of her presence every single day, and he is forced to teach her son, who looks so much like James Potter, but has her eyes, a constant reminder of his greatest loss. This single line, thrown at an 11-year-old boy as a rhetorical question, is not a random fact or a piece of trivia. It is the emotional blueprint for the entire 7-book arc. Everything Snape does from this moment forward, his apparent cruelty, his protection of Harry, his role as a double agent, the revelation of his memories in the Pensieve, is built on the foundation of that one unspoken message. The floral cipher is the key to understanding why Snape is the most tragic character in the series. And it is just one of many hidden patterns woven into the fabric of the story. The number 7, for instance, appears over and over again, shaping the destiny of Harry and Voldemort alike. In the next chapter, we will trace that pattern, the 7 encounters, the 7 Horcruxes, and the strange arithmetic of fate that binds the Chosen One to the Dark Lord. And so, Severus Snape's first lesson to Harry Potter was never about potions. It was about regret, coded in the petals of a lily and the bitterness of wormwood. That single question, whispered across a dusty classroom, unlocked a grief that spanned decades. But if you look closer, you will find that the entire wizarding world is woven from such threads of hidden symmetry, none more deliberate than the number 7. In arithmancy, the ancient magic of numerical divination, 7 is the most powerful of all numbers. It is the number of totality, of completion, of a cycle sealed by destiny. And J.K. Rowling built her entire story around its heartbeat. 7 years at Hogwarts, 7 players on a Quidditch team, 7 Weasley children, 7 books, 7 Horcruxes. And Harry Potter himself, the boy who lived, would encounter Lord Voldemort in the flesh exactly 7 times. Count them if you dare. The first encounter is in the graveyard of Little Hangleton, when the Dark Lord rises again, and Harry faces him, wand to wand, in the duel that forged the Priori Incantatem link. The second comes in the Ministry Atrium, a blur of gold and green as Voldemort possesses Harry during occlumency training. The third is in the shattering of the Inferno on the grounds of the Burrow, when the sky turns black and the battle seems endless. The fourth is the breaking of the Elder Wand's loyalty at Malfoy Manor, where Harry escapes with the trio. The fifth is the skirmish in the Shrieking Shack, when Voldemort believes he has won. The sixth is the final charge across the Hogwarts grounds, the duel that ends with the rebound of the killing curse. And the seventh, that is the moment in the forest when Harry walks to his own death and Voldemort casts the spell that destroys the Horcrux within him. 7 confrontations, 7 Horcruxes. The number is not coincidence, it is pattern. Just as there are 7 years of schooling, each year a layer of growth and trial, so Harry's journey mirrors the very structure of magic itself. The Weasleys have 7 children, and this family, the heart of the story, is itself a microcosm of the number that governs all. Even the Quidditch team, with its 3 chasers, 1 keeper, 1 seeker, and 2 beaters, that makes 7 on the pitch at any time, carries the same secret signature. The noble and most ancient House of Black believed that by naming their children after stars, they were ensuring their immortality, their eternal place in magical history. But stars, for all their brilliance, eventually burn out. And so did the Black family. Sirius died in the Department of Mysteries, falling through an ancient veil, leaving no heir. His younger brother Regulus, named for another star, died in a cave, trying to destroy Voldemort's Horcrux. Bellatrix, the brightest of them all in a terrible way, fell in battle. Narcissa survived, but the name Black faded with her marriage into the Malfoy line. By the end of the Second Wizarding War, the House of Black had become a footnote, a tapestry of once proud names now hanging in Grimmauld Place, gathering dust. What makes this so poignant is that the Blacks had a motto, toujours pur, always pure. They were obsessive about keeping their bloodline free from Muggle taint. And yet the irony is that the very family that prided itself on purity crumbled from within. Sirius, the heir to the Black fortune, chose friendship over blood. He became the opposite of everything his family stood for, and in doing so, he proved that the name was never what mattered. What mattered was the person who bore it. But the Black family is not the only one obsessed with lineage. There is a list, a document drawn up in the 1930s that catalogues the 28 truly pure blood families in Britain. The Weasleys are on it, though they are considered blood traitors. The Malfoys, the Longbottoms, the Crouches, the Gaunts, and yes, the Blacks. It is called the Sacred 28, and it shaped the social hierarchy of the wizarding world for decades. But that list, like the stars, holds secrets that are rarely discussed, and we will look at them closely in a moment, because the truth about those 28 names is far stranger than most people realise. From the Black family's obsession with astronomical purity, naming their children after stars and constellations as if to claim the heavens themselves. It's a short step to the most infamous document in wizarding genealogy, the list that defined whose blood was considered sacred and whose was not, the Sacred 28. It's the 1930s. The wizarding world is simmering with the same anxieties that grip the Muggle world. Fear of the other, fear of change, and a desperate clinging to old hierarchies. Into this climate steps one cantankerous Knot, a pure-blood supremacist, who compiles and publishes a directory of what he considers the 28 truly pure-blood families in Britain. He calls it the Pure Blood Directory, but everyone knows it as the Sacred 28. Now, the list wasn't an official ministry document. It was a social weapon, a way to publicly shame families who had allowed Muggle blood to dilute their lineage and to elevate those who had kept their line untainted. The impact was immediate and corrosive. Wizarding society, already divided, now had a printed hierarchy. Families like the Malfoys, the Lestranges, the Blacks. They could point to the list and say, "We are the aristocracy. We are the true heirs of magical Britain." It fed their delusions of grandeur. They clung to it like a birthright, even as their own family trees grew twisted with inbreeding and madness. Look at the Gaunts, descendants of Slytherin himself, but so obsessed with purity that their line crumbled into poverty and violence. The Sacred 28 didn't protect them. It only validated their isolation. But here's the twist that matters most to the story. The Potter family was not on the list, and the reason why reveals everything about the arbitrary and political nature of blood purity. The Potters have one of the oldest magical lineages in Britain. They trace their roots back to Ignotus Peverell, the youngest of the three brothers, from the tale of the Deathly Hallows. That makes them direct descendants of the second brother, if you follow the line, and gives them claim to the Invisibility Cloak that Harry himself inherits. They are by any measure an ancient and powerful family. So why were they excluded? Because by the 1930s, the Potters had a reputation. They were known for marrying Muggles, or at least for welcoming Muggle-borns into their line. The most recent example, a Potter, Henry Potter, great-grandfather of James, served on the Wizengamot in the early 20th century and openly campaigned for Muggle protection laws. He even once told the Minister for Magic, a man named Archer Evermond, that the ministry was wasting time on blood purity when dark wizards were running loose. That kind of public stance made the Potters targets. Cantankerous Knot, in compiling his list, deliberately omitted the Potters as a snub. He deemed them blood traitors. They had the lineage, but not the ideology. And in the world of the Sacred 28, ideology mattered more than ancestry. So the Potters were struck from the roll, and that exclusion tells us something crucial about wizarding society. Blood purity was never about true heritage. It was about power, about who got to call themselves pure and who got cast out. The Malfoys, the Lestranges, the Blacks. They wielded the list like a cudgel, but their own family histories were riddled with secrets, with half-bloods, with marriages to Muggle-borns that they quietly erased. The Sacred 28 was a fiction dressed as fact, yet that fiction had real consequences. It deepened the divides that Voldemort would later exploit. It gave young wizards like Lucius Malfoy a sense of entitlement, and it fueled the resentments that turned families like the Lestranges into fanatics. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't just believe in pure blood supremacy. She believed she was royalty, born to rule, because her name was on a list published decades before she was born. The irony, of course, is that the list itself has faded. By the time of Harry's story, the Sacred 28 is mentioned only in passing. a relic of an older era, but its echoes linger in every sneer about mudbloods, in every dark corridor of Malfoy Manor. The obsession with lineage didn't die, it just found new forms. And that obsession with blood, with who belongs and who doesn't, will shape the lives of the next generation in ways that are both heroic and tragic. It will drive 4 friends to break the oldest rule of magic, to become animagi illegally, to risk everything for each other. That story, the story of the Marauders and illegal magic, is one we'll uncover next. The Sacred 28, that infamous list of pure-blood families published in the 1930s, was meant to define the true aristocracy of wizarding Britain, and yet the Potters were left off it, despite their ancient lineage, simply because the name Potter sounded too common, too Muggle-like. Irony has a way of weaving through wizarding history, and nowhere is that more apparent than in the story of 4 teenage boys who broke every rule about lineage and magical lore to stand by their friend. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew, the Marauders. At Hogwarts, they were legends in their own time, but what most students didn't know was the depth of their sacrifice. Remus had been bitten as a child, a werewolf condemned to isolation each full moon. The castle had a secure location for him, the Shrieking Shack, built so he could transform safely. But that safety came at a cost. Remus was utterly alone during the most painful nights of his life, and his friends could not bear it, so they secretly set out to become animagi, wizards capable of transforming into an animal at will. This is not a simple charm. The animagus transformation is one of the most advanced branches of transfiguration, requiring years of study, a complex potion, and extremely precise timing. The Ministry of Magic maintains a strict register of all known animagi, because the ability offers a near-perfect disguise. A transformed wizard can pass as an ordinary animal, infiltrate secure locations, commit crimes without being identified. It is, in essence, a license for espionage, and the Ministry does not hand out such licenses lightly. The registration process involves proving mastery of the spell, undergoing official documentation of the exact animal form, and facing severe penalties for any unregistered transformation. But James, Sirius and Peter were not going to let bureaucracy stop them. They worked in secret for nearly 3 years, each step fraught with danger. The potion requires holding a single mandrake leaf in the mouth for an entire month, never swallowing or losing it, and then adding it to a brew under a precise celestial alignment. A single mistake could mean permanent disfigurement or death. They succeeded, of course. James became a stag, Sirius a large black dog, Peter a rat, and on the nights of the full moon, they would sneak into the Whomping Willows tunnel, transform into their animal forms, and run with Remus through the grounds. A werewolf is only dangerous to humans. To animals, he is simply another creature. So they gave Remus something he had never had: companionship, laughter, a pack. This illegal magic bound them together, and it also gave birth to one of the most remarkable magical objects in the castle, the Marauders map. They did not invent the concept of a map that reveals Hogwarts secrets. They used their knowledge of the castle's shifting architecture, the passageways they had discovered during their nocturnal adventures, and enchanted the parchment with the homunculus charm, which tracks every person within the boundaries. But what makes the map so unforgettable is how they wove their own personalities into its very fabric. It does not simply reveal names and locations. It mocks, it insults, it refuses to be a passive tool. When a student tries to open it, the parchment erupts in taunts. Professors Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauders map. It calls authority figures by silly nicknames, reveals the secret passage to Honeydukes with a cheeky flourish, and makes no apologies for its creator's teenage disdain for rules. That map was a declaration that even after graduation, even after their tragic fates, the spirit of 4 rebellious boys would continue to haunt Hogwarts, to outwit teachers and laugh at the very idea of order. Because in the wizarding world, some of the most powerful magic is born not from wand movements or ancient spells, but from loyalty, defiance, and the refusal to let a friend suffer alone. And the Ministry, for all its laws, cannot track that kind of magic. It simply happens, and then it echoes through generations. So when we think about the costs of wizarding society, the pure blood obsession, the fear of the unknown, the rigid rules, we have to ask, what happens when those rules are broken for love? What happens when an institution like Hogwarts, a place that charges no tuition and educates every magical child regardless of background, grapples with the tension between tradition and the messy, beautiful, illegal acts of kindness? That is where our next chapter begins. The Marauders story is a testament to the lengths friends will go for one another, breaking Ministry laws and mastering a transformation that most adult wizards never attempt. But that kind of fierce loyalty isn't the only hidden force at work inside Hogwarts. There is a quieter, more institutional kind of support that runs beneath the castle's ancient stones, woven into the very fabric of how the school operates. And it begins with something you might never expect from a 1,000-year-old fortress of moving staircases and enchanted ceilings. It is completely free to attend. That's right. Hogwarts does not charge tuition. Not a single knut, sickle or galleon. The entire cost of magical education, the salaries of the professors, the upkeep of the castle, the food in the Great Hall, the potions ingredients in the dungeons, the books in the library, the brooms in the air, is fully subsidized by the Ministry of Magic. When you think about it, this is an extraordinary commitment. The wizarding world is not a wealthy nation by Muggle standards. It is a hidden society, smaller than many cities, yet it chooses to pour a massive portion of its resources into a single school, and it has done so for centuries, long before the Ministry even existed in its modern form. The tradition of free magical education is older than the Department of Magical Education itself, older than the bureaucratic apparatus that now oversees it. It is one of the few things that the wizarding community, for all its fractious debates about blood purity and political power, has never seriously questioned. But free tuition only covers the basics. It does not pay for a student's wand, their robes, their cauldron, or their textbooks, and those costs add up. A standard first-year kit, as listed in the letter from Hogwarts, includes a cauldron of pewter, a set of crystal files, a telescope, a brass scale, a wand, and a full set of robes. For a family like the Weasleys, with 7 children to educate and only a single Ministry salary, these expenses were a constant source of strain. You see the weight of it in Molly Weasley's careful budgeting, in the hand-me-down robes and second-hand cauldrons. Yet even the Weasleys never worried about the core cost of attending Hogwarts itself. They never had to pay for tuition. The Ministry covered that. And for families in truly desperate straits, there was a further safety net, the Hogwarts Book Fund. It is a small detail, mentioned only in passing in the early books, but it speaks volumes about the wizarding world's quiet commitment to equality. The Hogwarts Book Fund is exactly what it sounds like. A discretionary fund set aside to help students who cannot afford their own textbooks, quills and parchment. It is not a loan. It is a grant offered without stigma or public notice. When a student receives their supply list, they simply apply and the books arrive. We know that the Weasleys, despite their financial struggles, never needed to rely on this fund, but it existed for those who did. A quiet promise that no magical child would be turned away from an education simply because their family couldn't afford a copy of a history of magic or a set of standard book of spells. Now think about the contrast. Here is a school with gargoyles guarding its headmaster's office, with ghosts drifting through its corridors, with a whooping willow that beats the ground in frustration. It is a medieval castle in every sense, steeped in tradition, clinging to old names and older grudges. And yet, beneath that ancient aesthetic, there is a surprisingly progressive social safety net. A system designed to ensure that wealth does not determine a child's magical future. The Ministry, for all its flaws, understands that magical education is a public good, not a commodity. Hogwarts is not a private academy for the elite. It is a national school, and every witch and wizard in Britain, from the richest pureblood to the poorest Muggle-born, walks through its doors on equal footing, at least where tuition is concerned. This financial law is never shouted from the battlements. It is quietly embedded in the background of the story, a foundation that supports the entire narrative. Without it, the Weasleys could never have sent Ron to school. Without it, many other families would have been forced to choose between a wand and a roof. And without it, the wizarding world would be a much darker place, where magical talent is reserved for those with gold. J.K. Rowling did not need to spell out every detail of the Ministry's budget, but the evidence is there, hidden in plain sight. Hogwarts is free because the wizarding world cannot afford to let a single spark of magic go unlit. Yet even in a school so well funded, there are problems that no amount of galleons can solve. The castle itself has a mischievous, chaotic personality, and sometimes that personality takes the form of a poltergeist. But that is a story for another chapter, one that involves a century of attempted exorcisms, a fight with a very angry sorting hat, and the only ghost in Hogwarts who has never been dead. And so, after exploring the surprising financial freedom Hogwarts offers, we turn to another kind of freedom entirely. The kind that has no respect for rules, order, or even the basic laws of architecture. There is a presence in the castle that was never hired, never sorted, and never dismissed. It is older than most of the staff, louder than any student, and far more stubborn than either. I am speaking, of course, about Peeves. Now, to understand Peeves, you have to understand what a poltergeist actually is in the wizarding world. Muggle folklore often treats them as ghosts that throw things, but that is a simplification. In magical theory, a poltergeist is not a spirit of the dead. It is something far more raw. Peeves is what happens when centuries of magical adolescence are concentrated under one roof. He is a chaos spirit, generated not by death, but by life, specifically the life of hundreds of magical teenagers, their emotions, their mischief, their sheer untamed energy. Hogwarts has stood for over 1,000 years, and during that time, the accumulated psychic residue of students has coalesced into a living, breathing, infuriatingly sentient manifestation of disorder. That is Peeves. He is not a ghost who chose to stay. He is a symptom of the school itself. This explains both his behaviour and his immortality. You cannot exorcise Peeves because he is not a ghost. You cannot reason with him because he has no human origin. He is a force of nature, as much a part of Hogwarts as the shifting staircases or the Chamber of Secrets, and the staff have tried many times to be rid of him. The most famous attempt occurred in the year 1876, when the caretaker of the time, a man named Rancorous Carp, decided he had finally had enough. Carp was not a patient man. He had spent years cleaning up after Peeves, repairing broken chandeliers, calming terrified students, and scrubbing ink from every surface. So he devised a trap. He constructed an elaborate magical contraption, something like a giant snare lined with enchanted chains, and he baited it with something Peeves could not resist. A freshly polished trophy engraved with the name of a student who had once outwitted him. When Peeves swooped in to destroy it, the trap sprang, and he was caught. For a brief moment, Carp thought he had won. Peeves was bound, thrashing, and apparently contained. But what Carpe had not accounted for was the fundamental nature of his prisoner. Peeves is not a being that can be imprisoned, because he is not a being at all. He is an event. The trap held him for 3 hours, and during that time the castle began to rebel. Portraits screamed. Stairs locked themselves in impossible positions, and every object in every classroom started to shake. The poltergeist was not just angry, he was summoning the very chaos of Hogwarts to his aid. Within a day, the school was uninhabitable. The evacuation was not immediate, but it became inevitable. On the third day, with Peeves still trapped, but the castle in full revolt, the headmaster gave the order. Every student, every professor, every house elf was moved to Hogsmeade. The school stood empty for 72 hours, and during that time Rancorous Carp had to face the truth. Peeves could not be removed. He was not a pest. He was the castle's immune response to order, and any attempt to suppress him only made the system collapse. The chains were removed. Peeves emerged, more gleeful than ever, and proceeded to dump an entire barrel of custard over Carpy's head. The caretaker resigned within the week, and the Ministry of Magic quietly issued a ruling that has never been overturned. Peeves is legally and magically inseparable from Hogwarts foundations. To remove him would require dismantling the castle's very enchantments, all of which are tied to the same adolescent energy that created him. He is, in effect, a permanent tenant written into the deed by 1,000 years of pranks. And so Peeves remains, drifting through corridors, singing rude songs, and occasionally dropping a heavy object on an unsuspecting prefect. He is a nuisance, yes, but he is also a reminder. Hogwarts is not just a building, it is a living thing, shaped by every student who has walked its halls. And sometimes, that living thing has a sense of humour. That sense of humour, however, is nothing compared to the intelligence behind another of the castle's oldest inhabitants. Because if Peeves is chaos made manifest, then there is another entity in Hogwarts that represents judgment, memory, and the weight of 1,000 years of choices. That entity does not throw things, it speaks, and it has been deciding the fate of students since long before the founders died. That is where our next chapter will take us. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. When the 4 founders of Hogwarts decided to leave the school, they faced a problem that went far beyond the question of who would teach what subject. The Sorting Hat itself was born from that moment of departure, but its creation was not a simple spell cast in an afternoon. It was a deliberate act of preservation, a way to keep the founders' collective intelligence alive long after their voices had fallen silent. Godric Gryffindor took the tattered old hat he found somewhere in the castle, a simple piece of headwear that might have belonged to a traveller or a scholar, and he called the 3 others together. Together, they poured something of themselves into the fabric, not just their magical signatures, but their judgment, their wisdom, their ability to see into the heart of a child and decide where that child belonged. To understand how profound that enchantment is, you have to imagine what it means to compress 4 entire personalities into a single object. Gryffindor's courage, Ravenclaw's intellect, Hufflepuff's loyalty, Slytherin's ambition, all of them woven into the weave of an old hat. And then, on top of that, the hat needed to be able to speak, to reason, to weigh evidence, and to make a decision that would shape a student's entire school career. It is not a simple sorting algorithm. It is a living intelligence, a mind that has been watching children arrive at Hogwarts for over 1,000 years, and that mind is capable of doubt. There is a phenomenon so rare that most students never witness it, but those who have remember it vividly. It is called a hat stall. When the Sorting Hat cannot decide between 2 houses for more than 5 minutes, the ceremony pauses. The hall grows silent, and the hat sits on a student's head, murmuring to itself, weighing possibilities. 5 minutes may not sound like a long time, but in a packed great hall, with hundreds of eyes watching, it feels like an eternity. The official record of hat stalls is short, but it includes some notable names. Minerva McGonagall was a hat stall, torn between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. The hat took 5.5 minutes to decide. And there is another case. A student who was sorted only after the hat had spent nearly 10 minutes in deliberation. A student of such unique balance that the hat itself seemed unsure which values would guide them best. Why does the hat hesitate? Because it is not simply looking at what a student is now, it is seeing what a student could become. That is the deepest layer of the enchantment. The founders did not just teach the hat to recognize existing traits. They gave it a kind of prophecy, a way to glimpse the potential futures that branch out from a single choice. The hat knows that putting a child in a certain house can change the course of their life, can set them on a path that leads to greatness or disaster. And so it weighs not only the present personality, but the invisible threads of destiny that hang around that young wizard or witch. Think about Harry Potter's sorting. The hat felt Slytherin in him, raw ambition, a desire to prove himself, a streak of darkness that could have grown. But it also saw Gryffindor, the heroic potential, the capacity for self-sacrifice. The hat hesitated, and Harry whispered that he did not want Slytherin, and the hat listened. That is the mark of its sentience. It can be persuaded. It can change its mind. It is not an automaton. It is a conversation. And because the hat has been present at every sorting ceremony since the founders walked the earth, it carries within it the memory of Hogwarts itself. It is the oldest continuous witness to the school's history. The portraits on the walls can only remember what they were told. But the hat was there. It saw the departure of the founders. It saw the rising of the Chamber of Secrets. It saw generations of students come and go, each one a tiny part of a larger story. The hat does not forget. Every year, when it sings a new song at the start of term, it shapes that song to reflect the state of the wizarding world. It warns, it celebrates, it mourns. It is a living history book, written in the voices of the 4 founders, updated by centuries of experience. There is even a theory among enchantment scholars that the hat's sentience has grown beyond what the founders originally intended. They gave it the ability to carry their collective judgment, but over the centuries, it has developed its own personality, its own sense of humour, its own quiet patience. It has become a character in its own right, a silent observer who only speaks once a year, but whose words echo through the entire life of the school. Now imagine that same hat, sitting in the headmaster's office for the rest of the year, listening, watching. It knows the secrets of the castle. It knows the fears of the students. It knows when dark times are coming, because it can feel the tension in the air, the way the magic of Hogwarts shifts when danger approaches. And the hat has seen dark times before, long before Harry Potter's name became a whisper in the dark. There was a war that tore the wizarding world apart, a war that began in shadows and ended in fire, a war that the Sorting Hat witnessed, not as a participant, but as the keeper of the school's conscience. That war would be known as the First Wizarding War, and its roots run deeper than any sorting ceremony, deeper than the founders themselves could have foreseen. The hat remembers it all, and if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of that war in every song it sings. That same sentient sorting hat, the one that weighs the courage of children and their deepest desires, was born of necessity. The founders knew that long after they were gone, Hogwarts would need a voice to continue their work, but the hat's creation took place in a world that was, by wizarding standards, peaceful. The founders could not have predicted the kind of darkness that would eventually force the hat to sort, not just children, but the entire magical world into 2 camps, those who would resist and those who would bow. The First Wizarding War was not a single battle. It was a decade-long shadow that crept across Britain like a slow poison. Voldemort's rise did not begin with a grand declaration. It began with whispers, with the quiet disappearance of those who opposed him, with the sudden silence of families who had once been outspoken. By the late 1970s, the atmosphere was thick with paranoia. Wizards and witches no longer trusted their neighbours. They checked their drinks for poison, cast detection charms on their mail, and looked over their shoulders in Diagon Alley. The Ministry of Magic, already slow to acknowledge the threat, was corroded from within by fear, and in some cases by imperious curse victims working for the enemy. Auras were dying in the field, safe houses were compromised, and the body count climbed. It was in this landscape that the original Order of the Phoenix was formed, not as an official ministry task force, but as a secret resistance movement operating from shadows and safe houses. Albus Dumbledore gathered those he trusted most, People like James and Lily Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, Frank and Alice Longbottom, Emmeline Vance, and others whose names would later be carved into tombstones. The Order fought a guerrilla war against the Death Eaters. They disrupted attacks, smuggled families to safety, and tried to protect the few prophecies that seemed to point toward Voldemort's downfall. But the cost was staggering. Nearly every member of the original Order lost someone, and many lost themselves. The Longbottoms, for example, were tortured into madness. The Marauders were shattered by betrayal, and at the centre of it all, the prophecy that only Harry could be the one to end the war was guarded by a secret known only to Dumbledore and a handful of others. Then came the night that changed everything. Halloween night, 1981, October 31st. In a small cottage in Godric's Hollow, the Potters had been in hiding for months under the Fidelius charm. The secret keeper, unbeknownst to James and Lily, was not Sirius Black but Peter Pettigrew, and Pettigrew, driven by cowardice and a desperate need to survive, had already betrayed them to Voldemort. That night, as trick-or-treaters in the Muggle world were laughing in the streets, Voldemort approached the cottage. He killed James Potter first, without hesitation. Then he went upstairs. Lily Potter, unarmed and defenseless, refused to step aside. She had a choice, and she chose to stand in front of her son. That act, pure, sacrificial love, cast an ancient protection that Voldemort, in his arrogance, did not understand. When the killing curse rebounded, Voldemort was reduced to a spirit, fleeing into the forests of Albania. Harry Potter, a baby with a curse scar on his forehead, survived. That single night shattered the war. The Death Eaters scattered, claiming they had been under the Imperious curse. The Ministry arrested the guilty and the innocent alike, and the wizarding world, still trembling, began to believe the war was over. But the cost was embedded into the fabric of the surviving families, the Weasleys, the Longbottoms, the Blacks, and of course, the orphaned boy who was left on a doorstep in Surrey. The Sorting Hat may have been born of the Founder's wisdom, but the First Wizarding War taught it, and all of magical Britain, that sometimes the most difficult sorting happens not at a school, but in the heart of a home, when you have to decide what you are willing to die for. And that rescue on Halloween night, the one that brought Harry to his aunt and uncle's house, was carried out by a half-giant who had no idea that his own mixed heritage would one day become another thread in the story. For Hagrid, the half-giant who was expelled from Hogwarts and then made the keeper of keys and grounds, his maternal giantess ancestry was a physical and social burden, but his loyalty to Dumbledore and his love for Harry would eventually make him one of the most important bridges between the magical world and a lonely boy who needed a friend. How a half-giant, born of two worlds that both feared and rejected him, came to be the one who first showed Harry the wizarding world is a story of heritage that goes deeper than blood. And it is a story we will turn to next when we explore the half-giant's heritage. The previous chapter ended with the First Wizarding War, a decade of terror that left families shattered and suspicion, running through wizarding society like poison through a well. But long before that war, long before Voldemort's first reign, even before he was known as anything other than Tom Riddle, the foundations of wizarding prejudice were already laid, buried in lineages and blood percentages, and the way the magical world treated those who were different. And there is no character in all of Harry Potter who better embodies that prejudice than Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid is not just a half-giant, a fact that seems so simple on the surface that many fans forget how radically it shaped his entire life. To understand Hagrid is to understand how the wizarding world polices its own definitions of humanity. Giants are considered beings, not persons, a legal distinction that strips them of basic rights within magical society. They are classified alongside werewolves and hags, under the Ministry's Beast Division, a bureaucratic choice that speaks volumes about the fear they inspire. Hagrid is a hybrid, a biological rarity, because giants and wizards rarely produce offspring. The gestation alone is dangerous, the size difference is extreme, and the cultural taboo strong enough that most such relationships never form. But when they do, the result is a child who inherits the giant's physical resilience, bones that heal faster, skin that resists curses, and a lifespan that stretches beyond a normal wizard's. Hagrid can survive falls that would kill any other man. He can wrestle with a dragon, take a stunning spell that would knock out a dozen Aurors, and still walk away with nothing more than a grumble. Yet this same heritage made him a target. The wizarding world does not tolerate ambiguity in blood status. Half-giants occupy a strange liminal space, too human to be completely relegated to the forest, too monstrous to be fully accepted in the halls of power. Hagrid feels this. Every time someone calls him a savage, every time a pure blood family refuses to seat him at their table, every time he is treated as a curiosity rather than a person, he became a symbol of that prejudice, not by choice but by existence, because his very presence challenges the neat categories the Ministry likes to impose. And that prejudice was weaponized in 1943, when Hagrid was still a student at Hogwarts. Tom Riddle, then a prefect with a talent for manipulation, saw in Hagrid the perfect scapegoat. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened, a student had been killed, and Riddle needed someone to take the fall. He framed Hagrid for the death of Myrtle Warren, painting the half-giant as the dangerous monster hiding in the castle. Why was Hagrid so easy to convict? Because the school already saw him as a threat. His giant blood made him suspicious, his size made him frightening, and the whispered rumours about his father leaving his mother because she was a giant only reinforced the idea that there was something wrong with him. Riddle did not have to create the bias. He only had to point at it. The professors, even Albus Dumbledore, could not stop the expulsion. The evidence was manufactured, but the belief behind it was real. That expulsion set a pattern that lasted for decades. Hagrid was never given the chance to prove himself as a wizard. His wand was snapped, his education cut short, and he was forced into the role of gamekeeper, a job that keeps him at the margins of Hogwarts life, always present but never quite belonging. He lives in a hut on the grounds, not in the castle. He tends to creatures that others fear, because he understands them in a way that purebloods never will. He is loyal to Dumbledore to a fault, partly because Dumbledore was the only one who saw beyond his heritage. And yet, even in the later years, when Harry and Hermione and Ron become his close friends, Hagrid still flinches at the word giant. It is a scar he carries, invisible but heavier than any physical wound. So when you think about the wizarding world's obsession with blood status, do not picture only the pure blood mania of the Blacks and the Malfoys. Picture Hagrid stuffing his face with rock cakes, crying over a dead dragon, hugging Harry so hard his ribs creak. He is gentle, he is kind, he is fiercely protective, and the system saw him as a monster because of what his mother was. That is the quiet horror of blood prejudice. It does not always wear a mask of hatred. Sometimes it wears the face of a headmaster who knows the truth but cannot reverse an injustice. Sometimes it wears the face of a student who never speaks up because it feels too big to fight. But Hagrid's resilience is not just physical. He endures. He keeps loving the world, even when the world does not love him back. And that perhaps is the rarest magic of all. Yet the history of prejudice in the wizarding world does not begin or end with giants. There is another weapon, far more famous, far more bloody, that carries its own legacy of violence and betrayal. That weapon has passed through hands stained with murder, and its trail stretches back centuries, touching the lives of some of the most powerful wizards who ever lived. It is a story of a stick of wood and of the madness it inspires. Hagrid's resilience as a half-giant is a quiet reminder that bloodlines in the wizarding world often carry hidden weight, physical, social, and magical. But if his mixed heritage made him a target of prejudice, the most famous mixed blood artifact in magical history has a far darker legacy. The Elder Wand has never been judged by its origin, only by the trail of violence it leaves behind. To understand why the Elder Wand commands such fear and obsession, you have to trace the blood that has soaked into its wood over centuries. It is not just a wand, it is a historical record written in conquest. Every time ownership changes hands, the transfer is marked by death. The wand's nickname, the Death Stick, is not poetic exaggeration. It is a literal description of its function. The wand chooses its master, but that choice is never gentle. It is forged in violence. The tale of the three brothers tells us that the Elder Wand was created by Death himself, given as a gift to the eldest brother, who demanded power above all else. But the legend is just a story. What is historically verifiable is that the wand has passed from wizard to wizard through murder and betrayal, from Antioch Peverell, who boasted of his invincibility and was killed in his sleep, to the ancient wizard Loxius, who wielded the wand for decades before being cut down in a duel. The wand's trail winds through obscurity and fame, through the hands of magical warriors who thought they had conquered fate. But the wand does not care about pride, it cares about allegiance, and that allegiance cannot be earned by simply stealing it. This is the crucial distinction that even powerful wizards fail to understand. You cannot win the Elder Wand by overpowering its previous owner in a back alley brawl while they are sleeping, or by tricking them into dropping it. The wand transfers its loyalty only when it senses that its current master has been defeated in a contest of magical will. It must be a clear victory, a submission that the wand itself recognizes. The biography of the wand is a long lesson in this brutal mechanic. One of the most infamous examples is the wizard Godric Gryffindor. Though even the wand's own history is shadowed by myth, what is certain is that the wand found its way to the wizard known as Emeric the Evil, who slaughtered every opponent who dared face him. He killed his way across Britain, amassing a collection of wands from defeated enemies. But the Elder Wand never left his side. Then along came a wizard named Egbert, who challenged Emeric in single combat and won. The wand shifted its loyalty, and Emeric died on the spot, and so the cycle continued, from Egbert to Godalot, from Godalot to Hereward, and then to Barnabas Deverell, who was killed by Loxius again. Wait, history here gets tangled, and that is part of the point. The Elder Wand's trail is so stained with blood that even the experts cannot agree on every transition. What matters is that no wizard ever retired peacefully while carrying the Death Stick. The wand does not allow retirement. It demands constant vigilance. When we reach a wizard named Arcus and then Livius, the pattern is clear. The wand always ends up in the hands of someone who craves power above all else, and that craving becomes their undoing. The most famous owner in recent history before the modern era was Gellert Grindelwald. He stole the wand from the wandmaker, Gregorovitch, who'd been studying it, trying to understand its secrets. Grindelwald did not defeat Gregorovitch in a duel. He simply broke into his workshop and took it, and for a time, the wand obeyed him. But this is where the mechanics become subtle. Grindelwald believed he had won the wand through theft, but the wand apparently accepted him, because Gregorovitch never truly mastered it. Gregorovitch was not the wand's true master. He was merely a keeper who had not won its allegiance. So when Grindelwald took it, the wand saw him as a legitimate claimant, but the wand's loyalty was fragile. It was only a matter of time before someone stronger came along. That someone was Albus Dumbledore, who defeated Grindelwald in a legendary duel in 1945. And here is the key. Dumbledore won the wand fair and square in a contest of magical skill. The wand transferred its allegiance to him, and from that moment, Dumbledore was its true master. He did not flaunt it. He did not kill Grindelwald. He simply beat him, and the wand recognized that defeat. But Dumbledore understood the curse of the wand. He knew that its power came with a price. He tried to break the cycle by arranging his own death in a way that would prevent anyone from defeating him. He planned to die undefeated, with the wand's allegiance passing to no one. He believed that if he was killed by Snape, who was acting under his orders, the wand would not see that as a defeat. It would see it as a planned end, and the wand's power would die with him. He was wrong. The wand does not care about intention. It cares about the moment. When Draco Malfoy disarmed Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, the wand's allegiance shifted to Draco. Dumbledore was not killed by Snape. He was already defeated. The wand transferred its loyalty to the boy who had taken his wand, even if Draco never laid a hand on the Elder Wand itself. That is the subtlety that Dumbledore missed. The wand recognizes conquest, not possession. Draco defeated Dumbledore in that moment, and the Elder Wand's allegiance leaped to him. From there, the wand passed to Harry Potter, who disarmed Draco during the skirmish at Malfoy Manor. Harry did not even know what he had done. He took Draco's wand, and because Draco was the master of the Elder Wand, that wand's allegiance transferred to Harry too. The Death Stick became Harry's property, without him ever touching it. And so the bloody trail ends not with a death, but with a living wizard who had no desire for power. Harry broke the cycle, not by winning the wand, but by choosing to let it die with him. He placed it back in Dumbledore's tomb, knowing that if he died undefeated, the wand's power would finally be extinguished. But imagine what the Elder Wand meant to someone like Voldemort, he who had built his entire existence on the fear of death, on the desperate need to conquer mortality. The wand's blood-drenched history made it the ultimate prize for him. He wanted an object that had proved, over and over, that it could make its master invincible. He could not see the wand's curse, only its promise. He believed that if he held the Elder Wand, he would never be defeated, and that belief blinded him to the wand's true nature. Voldemort spent months hunting for the wand, killing Gregorovitch, tracking Grindelwald, ignoring every lesson the wand's history had taught. He thought that owning the wand was enough. He did not understand that allegiance is earned through power, not possession. And when he faced Harry in the final battle, he was holding a wand that did not belong to him. The Elder Wand refused to kill its true master, and Voldemort died because he had never learned the wand's lesson. That power, when sought only for power's sake, turns on its wielder. The Elder Wand's bloody trail is a story about the wrong kind of ambition. It is a warning that every wizard who ever held it learned too late. But one object remains shrouded in deeper mystery, an artifact that represents the opposite response to death. Not power or confrontation, but evasion. The Invisibility Cloak's true nature holds the final key to understanding what the Hallows really mean. The Elder Wand's trail of blood and betrayal leaves a bitter taste, doesn't it? A wand passed through murder, its loyalty shifting with every strike, never truly owned by anyone. But among the three deathly Hallows, one stands apart not for its power or its ability to summon the dead, but for its quiet, enduring grace. Tonight, we turn to the Invisibility Cloak. Not just any cloak that hides you from sight, but the true Hallow, the one that's been in the Potter family for generations, the one that offers something far more valuable than invisibility. To understand why Harry's cloak is so extraordinary, you have to first understand the ordinary cloaks of the wizarding world. Most invisibility cloaks are made from demiguise hair, or else they are enchanted with a disillusionment charm, or woven with traces of the same magic that powers a bedazzling hex. But these cloaks have a terrible flaw: they fade over time. The enchantments wear thin, the demiguise hair loses its power, and eventually the cloak becomes a patchy, translucent mess, more a burden than a secret. They tear easily, they fray at the edges, and after a few decades of use, they are little better than a net. Harry's cloak is nothing like that. It is seamless, liquid silver under the right light, and it has survived for centuries without a single sign of wear. That alone should have told Dumbledore, should have told anyone who saw it, that this was no ordinary magical garment. It is a Hallow, and it is immortal. But the real wonder of the cloak is not its durability, it is what the cloak represents. In the tale of the three brothers, Death offered the youngest brother a cloak that would hide him even from Death's own sight. And what did the brother do with it? He did not conquer kingdoms. He did not bring back lost loved ones. He simply walked through life, avoiding death until he was old and ready. And then, He took off the cloak and greeted death as an old friend. The Invisibility Cloak is the only hallow that does not tempt its owner toward arrogance or grief. It asks for humility. You cannot boast about a cloak that hides you. You cannot wield it like a weapon. All it offers is a peaceful path, a way to live unnoticed, and finally, a way to step into the afterlife without fear. And for centuries, that cloak was passed down through the Potter family. Never sold, never stolen, never lost. Why? Because the Potters knew its true worth. Ignotus Peverell, the original owner, buried it with him, but his descendants somehow reclaimed it. It became a hidden heirloom, kept secret from most of the wizarding world. Even James Potter, Harry's father, used it only for mischief, never for ambition. The cloak remained humble, waiting for the one who would understand its deepest purpose. When Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest in his final battle, it was under that cloak that he gathered his courage. And when he finally faced Voldemort, he accepted death not as a defeat, but as a release. That is the true nature of the Invisibility Cloak. It is not a tool for hiding. It is a promise that death need not be a terror, so long as you meet it with humility. But the second hallow, the Resurrection Stone, carries a far heavier burden. To call back the dead is to face the cruelest truth. They cannot truly return, and that burden will twist anyone who dares to use it. Of the three deathly hallows, the Invisibility Cloak offers something the other two never could: peace. It grants its wearer the power to move unseen, to live among the world without being consumed by it. But the Resurrection Stone offers the opposite. It tempts with a promise that can never be fulfilled, and that is precisely what makes it the most dangerous of the three. The tale of the three brothers tells us that the second brother, Cadmus Peverell, asked death for something that would allow him to bring back lost loved ones, and death, being the trickster that he is, gave him the Resurrection Stone. But the twist is subtle and devastating. The stone does not bring the dead back to life. It summons shadows, echoes, projections of the departed that are neither truly alive nor truly at rest. They are memories given form, but they cannot interact with the living world in any meaningful way. They cannot eat, cannot touch, cannot feel the warmth of the sun. They exist only for the one who holds the stone. And even then, only as long as that person remains fully anchored to life. Cadmus Peverell learned this the hard way. After losing his beloved, he used the stone to conjure her spirit. She appeared before him, beautiful and familiar, but the moment he tried to embrace her, he found only air. She was a ghost of a ghost, a perfect replica of the woman he loved, but utterly unreachable. The psychological trap here is insidious. The stone does not allow you to say goodbye. It forces you to dwell in an eternal, half-living limbo. It makes the dead seem present, which only deepens the longing. Cadmus became so obsessed with this spectre that he eventually took his own life, trying to cross the boundary between worlds to be with her, and in doing so, he fulfilled death's cruel prophecy. The one who seeks to conquer death through resurrection finds only a faster path to it. Centuries later, Resurrection Stone passed through the Peverell line and eventually into the hands of the Gaunt family. The Gaunts, a proud and decaying pure-blood clan, had no idea what they possessed. To them, it was just a gaudy ring, passed down as a family heirloom, engraved with the mark of the Deathly Hallows. But when Tom Riddle, the boy who would become Lord Voldemort, learned of his mother's lineage, he claimed the ring. He saw it not as a hallow, but as a trophy, a symbol of his Slytherin ancestry. In his arrogance, he turned it into a Horcrux, embedding a fragment of his soul into the stone, and that act twisted the artifact even further. The stone's original function, already a trap, became corrupted beyond recognition. The ring now held a piece of Voldemort's malice, dark sentience that would later kill Alonzo Glick, and eventually nearly killed Dumbledore when he tried to destroy it. The Resurrection Stone, therefore, is not just a tool for summoning the dead. It is an object that preys on grief. It lures the holder into a false sense of closure, offering companionship that is hollow and unsustainable. Harry Potter, the only known person to use the stone without falling into its trap. Did so only as a final act before walking to his death. He summoned his parents Sirius and Remus, but he kept walking. He did not stop to linger. He understood that they were not truly there, only shadows to comfort him on his last journey. And that is the only safe way to use the stone, as a temporary farewell, not as a hope for a reunion. But most who come across the Resurrection Stone do not have that clarity. They are consumed by loss, desperate for one more word, one more glance, and the stone gives it to them, but at a terrible cost. It keeps them suspended between worlds, unable to move forward, unable to truly mourn. That is why the second Hallow is the most dangerous. The Elder Wand inspires ambition and violence, but at least its owners know they are fighting for power. The Resurrection Stone disguises itself as love, as healing, and that makes it far more treacherous. It whispers that death can be undone, when in truth, it only delays the inevitable heartbreak. And this brings us to a broader pattern in the wizarding world. The way that names themselves can become traps, names that mask true intentions, names that carry hidden meanings, names that condemn their bearers to a destiny they never chose. In the next chapter, we will explore how Rowling wove this symbolism into the very fabric of her villains, revealing that sometimes the most dangerous magic is the story a name tells. That heavy burden of the Resurrection Stone, the way it pulls the living toward the dead rather than offering any real reunion, stands as one of the most painful deceptions in the series. Cadmus Peveril's own end, driven mad by grief and longing, echoes through the centuries until the stone is forged into a ring and becomes a Horcrux, a tool of Voldemort's war against death. And that brings us to the very heart of how J.K. Rowling encoded her villains' deepest drives into the words she gave them as names. Consider Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix is a star name, the third brightest in the constellation Orion, and in Latin it means female warrior. That star is often called the Amazon star, evoking the fierce, independent women of myth. Rowling did not choose it lightly. Bellatrix is a warrior, but her loyalty is not to any noble cause. It is a fanatical devotion to a leader who embodies her own hunger for power. The name also carries an astronomical link to the celestial battlefield. Fitting for a witch who will die in the final conflict at Hogwarts, struck down by a mother defending her daughter. Every time you hear Bellatrix, you hear a star that burns with warlike intensity, and a woman whose entire identity is shaped by combat and submission to a darker will. Then there is Voldemort. The name is built from French and Latin roots. Vol can mean flight, and de mort means of death, flight from death. This is the raw, unvarnished motivation of the entire character. He never seeks immortality as a means to protect others or to achieve some greater good. He simply cannot bear the idea of his own end. The name is a confession. It tells you, before you ever learn his backstory, that this is a man so terrified of the grave that he will tear the world apart to avoid it. But there is another layer. In French, vol also means theft, so Voldemort could be read as theft of death. He steals from death, yes, through Horcruxes, but he also steals the lives of others, and in the end, death is not something you can flee or steal from. It is a force that eventually claims everyone, even those who try to name themselves beyond it. Rowling's use of Latin and French roots is not decorative. It is a system of foreshadowing laid into the very fabric of the story. Before you know what Bellatrix will do, her name hints at her martial, unbending nature. Before you understand Voldemort's obsession with conquering mortality, his name gives it away. The same principle applies to many other characters, from the wolfish Remus Lupin to the sly, silver-tongued Severus Snape. Rowling was building her world with linguistic signals, so that when you learn the truth, it feels inevitable, as if the name itself had always pointed the way. It is a technique that rewards rereading. On a first journey through the books, you might not notice the pattern, but after you know what these characters become, their names seem to have been whispering the truth all along, and that is part of what makes the lore so rich. Nothing is accidental. Even the smallest word choice carries weight. That same care extends to the villains, who operate not only in the shadows of dark magic, but also within the halls of bureaucracy. One such figure, whose name is as deceptively soft as her exterior, will be the subject of our next chapter. Her name is Umbridge, and her fate after the war is a story you will want to hear. We've traced the etymology of Voldemort's name, how his very title is a confession of his life's purpose, flight from death, and we've lingered on Bellatrix, the warrior star, whose name foretold her ferocity in battle. But there is another name in this story, one that carries no celestial weight, no Latin grandeur, and no dark prophecy. Dolores Umbridge. Her name is almost painfully plain, rooted in the Spanish for sorrow and the Old English for shadow. And yet, in the aftermath of the war, her fate became one of the most quietly devastating ironies in all of wizarding justice. After the Battle of Hogwarts, the Ministry of Magic faced a reckoning. The corrupt had to be purged, the collaborators unmasked, the Death Eaters rounded up. But what do you do with someone who never cast an unforgivable curse, never raised a wand in open battle, yet whose cruelty left deeper scars than many a dark wizard's? Dolores Umbridge was arrested in the weeks following Voldemort's fall. She was interrogated, tried and convicted. Not for murder, not for torture in the traditional sense, but for the systematic abuse of power, for the torture of students using a blood quill, the persecution of half-breeds and Muggle-borns, and for her willing complicity in the regime that turned the Ministry into a puppet of Voldemort's will. Her sentence was life in Azkaban. And here is where the story turns sharply toward the poetic. For years, Umbridge had been one of the Ministry's most vocal advocates for the use of Dementors as prison guards, as weapons of intimidation. She signed decrees that allowed the kiss of the Dementor to be performed without trial. She relished the fear these creatures instilled. She even attempted to deploy them against Harry Potter in the Ministry atrium during her reign as High Inquisitor. She saw the Dementors as tools, as instruments of order. She never once considered the possibility that one day she would be on the other side of their hunger. The Dementors were not disbanded after the war. They remained in Azkaban, though their influence was curtailed and their numbers regulated. And so, Dolores Umbridge, the woman who had sentenced children to write lines in their own blood, who had ordered the Dementors to feed on the souls of innocents, was now locked in a cell where the cold and the despair seeped through the walls every moment. The same creatures she had used as instruments of terror were now the ones tasked with sucking the happiness from her existence. Day after day, night after night, she would hear the rattling breath, feel the chill deepen, and know that the very tools of her cruelty had been turned against her. Rowling has said that Umbridge is her most hateful character, more despicable than Voldemort, because her evil is of a kind that exists in every bureaucracy, every institution, every school. It is the evil of the petty tyrant who enforces rules without questioning their morality, who punishes with a smile and a clipboard. Voldemort was a force of nature, a terror that everyone could see. But Umbridge, she was the one who signed the forms. She was the one who smiled while she inflicted pain. And in the end, she was condemned to spend the rest of her life in a place where there is no rule book, no procedure, no smile that can protect her from the Dementor's kiss. A kiss she once authorized for others. Her cell is small, the walls are damp, the windows are barred and high, and every so often, when the guards walk past, they might hear her talking to herself, repeating Ministry protocols from memory, as if clinging to some shred of order. But the Dementors do not care about protocol. They feed on her sorrow, on her regret, on the thousand small cruelties she committed and cannot undo. And in that, there is a grim satisfaction for anyone who suffered under her hand. But there is also a warning. The system that she helped build, the system that allowed her to thrive, is the same system that now holds her. It is a mirror, and the reflection is not kind. The post-war reckoning for the Ministry's most hated bureaucrat was not a dramatic duel or a public execution. It was a quiet trial, a sentence written in ink, and a lifetime in a prison where the air tastes like despair. And the irony of Umbridge being tormented by the very dementors she once used as political tools is not lost on anyone who remembers her pink cardigan, her toad-like smile, and her gleeful cruelty in a classroom full of first years. That is where her story ends. Not in glory, not in redemption, but in the cold silence of a cell she once helped build. And from the darkness of Azkaban, we turn to something softer, greener, alive. Because the wizarding world is not only made of prisons and punishments, it is also made of roots that hold the earth, of leaves that whisper secrets, and of plants that kill or cure. Up next, we step into the greenhouses of Hogwarts, where the true poisoners and healers of the magical world go to school. The botanical secrets of herbology. We left Dolores Umbridge in Azkaban, her own tools turned against her. A punishment that felt almost poetic for someone who weaponized bureaucracy. But while the ministry dealt with its most hated bureaucrat, another story was unfolding in the greenhouses of Hogwarts. A story that proved just how dangerous a soft science could become. Herbology, often dismissed by ambitious students as little more than gardening with magical fertilizer, had roots far deeper than anyone realized. And those roots stretched back centuries into the very soil of medieval Europe, where monks and cunning women gathered plants not just for healing, but for protection, for prophecy, for transformation. The connection between real-world medieval herbalism and the magical plants in Hogwarts greenhouses is no coincidence. J.K. Rowling did what she did best. She took the old folklore, the recipes, the warnings, and she gave them a new life in a world where mandrakes scream and gillyweed grows in secret. Consider the mandrake. In medieval herbals, it was one of the most feared and revered plants. People believed it could cure infertility, induce sleep, even drive away demons. But they also believed that if you pulled it from the ground, it would let out a shriek so terrible it could kill you. Or at least drive you mad. Sound familiar? The mandrake in Harry Potter is a perfect magical echo. Its scream is lethal to adults, but restorative to those petrified. That duality, danger and cure, was the very heart of real mandrake lore. Apothecaries sold mandrake roots, shaped like little men, claiming they were the true plant, and the superstition around it lasted for centuries. When Professor Sprout's third years repotted those screaming plants, they were continuing a tradition older than Hogwarts itself. And then there is gillyweed. Neville Longbottom gave it to Harry in the second task. While the plant itself seems like a whimsical creation, gills and fins for underwater breathing, it has a far older counterpart. In British folklore, people spoke of a plant called the water lily, or the gillyflower, which was sometimes tied to water spirits. There were also tales of a gillygrass that supposedly let you breathe underwater, though the details were always hazy, lost in the mist of folk memory. Rowling took that folk memory and crystallized it into something tangible, a slimy, grey-green weed that grants temporary aquatic adaptation. It was a clever nod to the old belief in magical water plants, the ones that healers and fishermen whispered about. But the true transformation of herbology from a background subject into a vital wartime skill came from one student, Neville Longbottom. For years, Neville was the boy who could barely remember a password, who trembled under Snape's gaze, who lost his toad. But in the greenhouses, something changed. He found a patience and a focus that eluded him in other classes. Professor Sprout encouraged him, and Neville discovered he had a gift for nurturing things, for understanding the silent language of leaves and roots. When the Battle of Hogwarts arrived, that gift became a weapon. Neville knew the greenhouses as intimately as any soldier knows his battlefield. He knew which plants could incapacitate, which could heal, and which could be used to create a defensive wall of venomous tentacular and spitting bushes. He stepped out of the shadow of his classmates and helped turn the greenhouses into a bastion of resistance. Herbology was no longer a soft science. It was the science of survival, and Neville had mastered it. From the shrieking mandrakes that echoed medieval terror to the gillyweed that embodied old water legends. The plants of Hogwarts carried the weight of real history, and in Neville's hands, that history became a force that helped save the wizarding world. But while the greenhouses were busy with life and death, another system was working silently in the background, one that connected every witch and wizard in Britain, carrying letters, parcels, and secrets across the landscape on feathered wings. That story begins with a single owl, a red envelope, and a message that could change everything. That is the subject of our next chapter, the Owl Post System. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. From the greenhouses where mandrakes scream and gillyweed stretches toward enchanted light, we lift our gaze upward to the roofs of Hogwarts, where owls gather in the twilight like silent messengers of a world that prefers feathers over fibre optics. The Owl Post System is not just a convenience in wizarding Britain. It is a living network, a biological and magical mystery that has never been fully explained, even to the witches and wizards who rely on it every day. How does an owl, given a letter with nothing but a name and perhaps a vague location, find its recipient anywhere in the world, without an address, without a postal code, without even a street name? The answer is not found in any textbook, but woven into the very nature of these birds. J.K. Rowling built the Owl Post on a foundation of old folklore, and the idea that owls possess a kind of innate magical homing ability. But within the wizarding world itself, the mechanism remains deliberately unexplained. What we do know is that owls are not simply trained animals. They are bonded to their owners through a blend of affection, enchantment, and what might be called an extended magical contract. When Harry buys Hedwig from Aelop's Owl Emporium, that bond is established, and from that moment forward, Hedwig can find Harry wherever he goes, whether it is the Hogwarts castle, the burrow, or even the remote cliffs of a seaside cave. But this ability extends far beyond personal pets. School owls that belong to Hogwarts can deliver mail to any student in any house, any dormitory, any year, without needing to know which staircase leads to which tower. They seem to sense the recipient's magical signature, almost like a compass that points toward intent rather than location. There is a more pragmatic layer to this mystery. The wizarding world rejected Muggle technology, not out of ignorance, but out of a deep understanding that magic and electricity do not mix well in close proximity. Try to send a letter by Muggle post inside a castle saturated with centuries of enchantment, and that letter is as likely to end up in a vanishing cabinet as it is in the hands of its intended reader. Telephones, radios, and even simple electric lights flicker and fail near strong magical fields. The Owl Post, by contrast, thrives on the very ambiguity that destroys Muggle systems. An owl does not need to navigate by satellite. It flies by instinct, guided by a subtle magical thread that connects the sender to the receiver. This thread is not visible, but it is as real as the parchment and wax that carry the message. The hierarchy of messenger birds is a subtle but important element of wizarding social status. Not all owls are equal. The common barn owl is the working class of the Owl Post, reliable, hardy, and often used for general school deliveries. They are the ones you see swooping into the Great Hall at breakfast, dropping off copies of the Daily Prophet and routine letters. Slightly higher on the scale is the tawny owl, favoured by families who want a bit more dignity in their correspondence. Then there is the great grey owl, large and imposing, often used for heavy parcels or official ministry documents. But the true status symbol is the snowy owl. Like Hedwig, snowy owls are rare in Britain, and they carry a certain elegance and mystery that marks their owner as someone with taste or connections. Draco Malfoy's eagle owl is another example, a large, aggressive bird that matches his family's desire for intimidation and luxury. Owls can even be a form of political statement. Owning a particularly exotic species suggests wealth and a global reach. just as a simple barn owl might suggest modesty or lack of pretension. The Owl Post also highlights the wizarding world's deep conservatism when it comes to communication. Muggle society moved from letters to telephones to emails to instant messaging, but wizards stayed with owls for centuries. Not because they could not invent something faster, but because the owl represented something more than speed. It represented trust. You cannot hack an owl. You cannot intercept a letter mid-flight without a powerful spell. The delivery itself is a kind of ritual, a moment where the natural world and magic meet in a flight path that no satellite can trace. Even when the Ministry developed the Flow network, and later the Patronus-based messaging used by members of the Order of the Phoenix, the Owl Post remained the backbone of everyday communication, a quiet constant in a world that valued tradition over efficiency. And so the skies above the wizarding world are never truly empty. From the rookery at Hogwarts to the owleries in every Diagon Alley shop, these birds carry not just letters, but secrets, threats, declarations of love, and summons to war. In the final years of the Second Wizarding War, when Voldemort's forces began to monitor all forms of communication, the Owl Post became a target and a lifeline. The Battle of Hogwarts timeline would hinge on messages delivered by owl, on intelligence carried in feathers, on the last desperate hope that a letter could reach its destination before the castle fell. But that is a story for another night, when we trace the hours and minutes of that final confrontation. From the moment the first spell was cast to the silence that followed, May 2nd, 1998. That date marks more than the end of the Second Wizarding War. It marks the moment when J.K. Rowling's carefully constructed timeline finally caught up with the real world she had been building since the early 1990s. The final book, published in 2007, places the climactic battle exactly 9 years earlier, in the same year that the series itself began its journey into readers' hands. There is a strange symmetry in that. The war that defined a generation of wizards ended the same year the first book was published, as if the story refused to let the conflict breathe beyond its own pages. But to understand the Battle of Hogwarts, you have to go minute by minute, not because the battle itself was long. It lasted only a handful of hours, but because every second carried weight. The fighting began when Lord Voldemort demanded the surrender of Harry Potter, a demand that Harry himself rejected in the Room of Requirement. That room, hidden behind a door that appears only when someone truly needs it, became the final bastion of student resistance. It was not a grand hall or a tower. It was a space that could become anything. And that night became a fortress for the remnants of Dumbledore's army, for Neville Longbottom, for Ginny Weasley, for the students who refused to leave. The first wave of Death Eaters entered through the main gates at around 9 o'clock in the evening. Within minutes, the castle was a battlefield. The minute-by-minute breakdown reads like a military log. At 9:47, Professor McGonagall animated the suits of armour. At 10:12, the giant spiders were driven back by a combination of fire spells and the Whomping Willow. At 10:34, Fred Weasley fell. At 10:49, Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. The toll kept climbing, but the Room of Requirement held. It became a command centre, a triage ward, a hiding place. Neville Longbottom led a group of students out of that room to attack the Death Eaters from behind, and it was from that room that Harry emerged to face Voldemort in the Great Hall. The room's strategic importance cannot be overstated. Without it, the defenders would have had no safe zone, no place to regroup. It was the heart of the resistance, a floating chamber that answered only to those who truly needed refuge. And the date itself, May 2nd, 1998, was not chosen at random. Rowling has said that she mapped out the series ending early in her planning, and that the Battle of Hogwarts always fell on this specific day. The coincidence of 1998 being the year her story's war concluded, while the real world also saw the publication of the first Harry Potter book in 1997. is a layer of meta-synchronicity that reinforces the theme of cycles. Death and rebirth, endings and beginnings. The last minute of the battle came just before midnight. Voldemort fell, and the Elder Wand passed to Harry. The castle stood scarred but intact, and the Room of Requirement, now repaired, resumed its quiet existence, waiting for the next student who might need a place to hide. But the battle was not just about that night. It was about the choices that led to it, the love that defied it, and the mothers who died to protect their children. That thread, the influence of maternal death, runs through every corner of this story, from Lily Potter's sacrifice to the loss that shaped Tom Riddle. And it is that thread we will follow next, into the silence of a mother's final act. The Battle of Hogwarts finally ended on that May night in 1998, but the seeds of that final conflict were planted years earlier, in a moment that had nothing to do with wands or prophecy. On December 30, 1990, Joanne Rowling lost her mother, Anne, after a long battle with multiple sclerosis. Anne was only 45 years old, and in that loss, the entire Harry Potter series found its emotional core. Not in magic, but in the raw, unpolished weight of grief. You might not immediately associate a young boy who survives a dark wizard with a 30-year-old woman who lost her mother, but the connection runs deeper than any spell ever could. When Rowling began writing Harry Potter in the early 90s, she was, by her own admission, carrying the sadness of her mother's death with her into every chapter. And that sadness transformed the books from a simple adventure about a boy wizard into a meditation on something far more universal: the desire to bring back the dead and the necessity of letting them go. Think for a moment about the very first magical object Harry encounters at Hogwarts that is not a broomstick or a wand: the Mirror of Erised. It arrives in the first book, and it is arguably the most emotionally devastating piece of magic in the entire series. The mirror does not teach you to fly. It does not defend you from dark forces. It simply shows you what you most desperately long to see. For Harry, that is his parents alive, standing behind him. And for Rowling, writing that scene less than 2 years after burying her mother, the mirror must have felt like a direct manifestation of her own grief. Consider the details. The inscription around the mirror reads, Aristra eru oyub kafru oit on warsi. Mirror text. Backwards, it says, I show not your face but your heart's desire. The very design of the object, its quiet, reflective nature, invites you to look, but then to ache. Harry stares at the mirror for days, losing track of time, skipping meals, returning again and again to see the family he never knew. Dumbledore eventually warns him that the mirror offers no knowledge, no truth. It is a trap for the happy and a torment for the grieving. And yet, Dumbledore does not remove the mirror. He merely reminds Harry that the door to happiness must be opened from the inside. That tension between wanting to hold on to what is lost and knowing you must move forward is the engine that drives the entire series. Harry's search for his parents' story, for the truth of their deaths, for a way to connect with them beyond the veil, becomes the emotional thread that pulls him through 7 books. And it is a thread that Rowling herself was pulling on as she wrote. But it was not just the Mirror of Erised. The theme of death permeates every corner of the wizarding world. The first creature Harry meets at Hogwarts is not a friendly ghost, but a blood-fanged monster. No, actually, it is a centaur. No, the very first magical creature he encounters is a troll in a dungeon. But even earlier, before any monster appears, there is the arrival of the Sorting Hat, which sings of courage and cunning, but also of the Founder's fear of death. And then in the 3rd book, the Dementors arrive. Dementors, as we are told, suck the happiness out of a person, but they also force you to relive your worst memories. They are creatures that live to drain the soul, and they are the government's answer to the problem of mortality. They guard a prison where no one can escape, not even through death. By the time we reach the final book, death is no longer a shadow. It is a character. The Deathly Hallows are objects supposedly given by death itself, Voldemort's deepest fear is not power, it is dying. He makes Horcruxes to cheat death, and he destroys himself in the process. Harry, on the other hand, walks willingly into the forest to die, trusting that love and sacrifice will carry him through. That confrontation with death is what separates Harry Potter from other children's fantasy. It is not a story about a chosen one who defeats a dark lord with a clever spell. It is a story about a boy who learns that death is not the worst thing, that losing someone is not the end of love, that the desire for the unattainable, to hold a dead mother's hand, to hear a dead father's voice, can either consume you or free you. And it all traces back to a woman sitting in a cafe in Edinburgh in 1990, writing a sentence on a napkin about a boy who had no parents because she had just lost her own. That visceral, aching loss gave Harry his vulnerability. It gave him his longing, and it gave the series a soul that no amount of wand lore or broomstick specs could ever replace. The Battle of Hogwarts was won not by spells, but by a philosophy of acceptance. Harry accepted that he had to face death. That acceptance is what made him stronger than Voldemort, who never accepted it, and that acceptance was born in the moment. Rowling learned to live with the mirror's reflection. From that emotional foundation, the wizarding world begins to mirror the mundane one in strange, unexpected ways. The next time you hear the flutter of an owl wing, or the clink of a goblet in the Great Hall, or the quiet hum of Hagrid's tea kettle over a fire, ask yourself, how much of this is magic, and how much is just the ordinary ache of being human? That question will lead us, in the next chapter, into the curious ways Hogwarts and the Ministry reflect our own Muggle world. Not in spells, but in systems, in bureaucracy, and in the quiet routines that make life feel real, even when magic is everywhere. We ended the last chapter with grief and the haunting pull of the Mirror of Erised, a symbol of everything we can never have. But grief, in the wizarding world, is not just a personal emotion, it becomes a political force, one that shapes the very institutions that govern magical society. And perhaps nowhere is that more visible than in the Ministry of Magic itself, a bureaucracy that seems almost allergic to change. Think about the Ministry as it in the books. It's a sprawling, labyrinthine organisation, buried deep beneath London, hidden from Muggle eyes by layers of enchantments and bureaucratic red tape. The Ministry is not just a government, it's a mirror, a distorted mirror of the Muggle world it pretends to be separate from, reflecting every inefficiency, every corruption, every stubborn refusal to evolve that plagued 20th century British government. Rowling didn't invent a fantastical utopia. She built a parody, a wonderfully precise satire of the civil service, the postal system, the courts, and the news media of the 1990s. Take the Minister for Magic himself. Cornelius Fudge is not a villain, in the way Voldemort is a villain. He's a bureaucrat, a politician whose primary instinct is to preserve the status quo. When Dumbledore warns him that Voldemort has returned, Fudge doesn't act out of evil. He acts out of denial, out of fear of losing his job, out of the same kind of willful ignorance that real-world governments display when facing inconvenient truths. The Ministry's response, the smear campaign against Harry and Dumbledore, the appointment of Dolores Umbridge as High Inquisitor at Hogwarts, is a textbook case of institutional inertia. They would rather discredit the messenger than address the message, and that stagnation runs deep. The wizarding world, for all its magic, is profoundly conservative. They still use quills and parchment when Muggles have moved to ballpoint pens and word processors. They communicate by owl when the Muggle world has telephones, fax machines, and by the time the books take place, the early internet. This is not a coincidence. Rowling is making a deliberate point. The magical community, by hiding behind the Statute of Secrecy, has isolated itself from progress. They have become a closed society, insular and self-satisfied, convinced that their way is superior, and so they miss out on the innovations that could make their lives easier, or more importantly, that could save them. The tension between the Statute of Secrecy and the inevitable overlap of the two worlds runs like a fault line, through the entire series. Every time a Muggle sees a flying car or a dragon, the Ministry scrambles to perform memory charms and cover-ups. But the secrets are getting harder to keep. The digital age is knocking at the gates of the wizarding world, and the Mist refuses to answer. They have no equivalent of the internet, no centralized magical database that might have helped them track dark artifacts or communicate faster. Instead, they rely on Floo powder, Owlpost, and Patronuses, charming but inefficient. In the final battle, the lack of modern communication almost costs them everything. The Ministry's corruption isn't just about bad leadership. It's built into the structure. Look at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. In principle, it's a noble institution, keeping the peace, enforcing the statute of secrecy. In practice, it becomes a tool for persecution. During the First War with Voldemort, the Ministry resorted to using Dementors as prison guards, a decision that would later come back to haunt them. When those same Dementors joined the Dark Lord, the Ministry's solution to a crisis is almost always more control, more bureaucracy, more layers of paperwork. They create committees to study problems rather than solve them. They appoint figureheads like Minister Scrimgeour, who tries to look tough but is merely a puppet. And then there's the Wizengamot, the magical court. It's a mockery of justice. Trials are brief, often without proper representation. Sirius Black was sent to Azkaban without a trial. Buckbeak the Hippogriff gets a hearing that is clearly a formality, a prelude to execution. The system is rigged in favour of the powerful, the wealthy, the pure blood families who have sat on the Wizengamot for centuries. It's not so different from the old British House of Lords, where inherited privilege outweigh merit. But this stagnation is also a choice. The wizarding world has the tools to change. They have magic that could revolutionise everything. In instant transportation, self-updating documents, memory modification, but they resist. Why? Because change threatens the power structures. The pure-blood aristocracy depends on tradition to justify their supremacy. If Muggle-born witches and wizards are allowed to bring in new ideas, if the Ministry starts adopting Muggle technology, the entire hierarchy could collapse, and that is a risk they are unwilling to take. So the Ministry remains a parody, a funhouse mirror of the world outside. The post-war reforms hinted at by Rowling suggest that things are slowly getting better. Kingsley Shacklebolt becomes minister and dismantles the worst abuses, but the underlying tension never fully disappears. The statute of secrecy is still in place. The wizarding world is still hiding, and as the Muggle world hurtles toward an ever more connected future, the question remains: how long can the two worlds stay separate? The cracks are already showing. It is this same fear of death and change, this clinging to the old ways, that leads some wizards to seek immortality at any cost. And that brings us to the darkest magical invention of all. A subject that pushes the boundaries of magic far beyond safety and ethics. The next chapter will explore how one wizard's refusal to accept death created a framework that nearly destroyed the entire wizarding world. The Horcrux Framework, the Ministry of Magic, for all its grand Victorian architecture and self-importance, was a machine of paperwork and delay. It was a mirror of Muggle bureaucracy, yes, but with a twist. The wizards had simply replaced typewriters with quills and filing cabinets with enchanted parchment that shuffled itself into the wrong drawer. And behind that facade of order, something far darker was brewing. Because while the Ministry fussed over cauldron thickness regulations and the proper disposal of flobberworm mucus, one man had already found a way to break the most fundamental law of magic. He had found a way to cheat death itself. To understand Voldemort's Horcruxes, you have to start with the act that creates them. It is not a simple spell. It is not a wand movement or an incantation learned from a book. It is an act of deliberate, premeditated murder, and not just any murder. The killing must be cold, purposeful, a tearing of the soul that is so violent it can be physically felt. When you commit murder, the books tell us, you damage your soul. Most wizards feel guilt, remorse, a wound that can heal with time and repentance. But Voldemort, from his very first killing, had no remorse. He felt only triumph. And so, instead of letting that spiritual wound slowly scab over, he learned to rip the torn fragment away from himself entirely. He learned to encase it in an object. That is the metaphysical cost. You are not simply hiding a piece of yourself, like a lock of hair in a locket. You are fracturing your own being. Each time Voldemort made a Horcrux, and he made 7, a number of profound magical power, he became less human. His face grew more serpentine. His emotions dulled. His connection to the living world weakened. The shard of soul he lost was replaced by a cold, hollow hunger, and the act of murder itself. It became easier. The first one, killing his father and grandparents at the Riddle House, might have felt like a declaration of power. By the time he murdered a simple Muggle tramp to make his 5th Horcrux, it was as casual as brushing dust off a sleeve. That is what the pursuit of immortality does to you. It empties you out until the only thing left is the obsession. But why did Voldemort choose such specific objects for his soul fragments? Why not a random pebble, a common coin, something easily hidden? He was, for all his cruelty, a creature of immense theatrical vanity. He did not want his soul to live inside a cabbage. He wanted it to reside in treasures, objects that told a story. He chose the locket of Salazar Slytherin because it connected him to the founder he most admired. He chose Hufflepuff's cup, Ravenclaw's diadem, because they were trophies of conquest, proof that he had surpassed the very founders of Hogwarts. He chose the diary because it was a weapon, a tool to open the Chamber of Secrets and prove his heritage. He chose the Ring of the Gaunts because it was a symbol of the Peverell line, of the Deathly Hallows he never truly understood. And he chose Nagini, a living creature, because it could move, because it could feed, because it was a reminder that even a soul fragment must eat and kill. Each Horcrux was a monument to his own greatness in his mind. They were not just anchors for his life. They were altars to his ambition, and that arrogance, that need to display his trophies, was the flaw that ultimately undid him, because you cannot display a trap without someone eventually finding it. And then there was the one he never planned, the accidental Horcrux. When Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow on that Halloween night in 1981, he intended to kill a baby. He cast the killing curse, and it rebounded. But in that moment of magical collision, a fragment of his own soul, already unstable from so many divisions, broke off and latched onto the only living soul in the room that could hold it. Harry Potter. He did not mean to make a Horcrux that night. He did not even realize he had done it until years later, when he felt a strange connection to the boy, a pain in his scar, a sharing of vision. The prophecy had already bound them. Neither could live while the other survived, but the Horcrux bound them even tighter. Voldemort had poured a piece of himself into his own worst enemy, and that piece would become the very thing that allowed Harry to walk into the Forbidden Forest and survive his own death. It is a strange, almost poetic irony. The most powerful dark wizard of the age, so careful to hide his soul in treasures of historical significance, never noticed that the most important Horcrux of all was walking around with a lightning bolt scar and a wand. He never noticed because it was not a trophy. It was a boy, and that boy, through love, through sacrifice, through the simple act of being willing to die, turned the framework of Horcruxes inside out. He did not need to destroy them all with spells and venom. He needed to understand them. And in the end, what Voldemort thought was his greatest safeguard, the splitting of his soul, became the crack through which his entire empire crumbled. That kind of deep, layered magic, the magic of objects and legacies, of books and memories, is something the wizarding world has always guarded closely. And one place where that magic is most alive, most palpable, is the kind of shop that smells of old parchment and ink. It is a place where a young orphan once stood, wide-eyed, staring at a shelf of books on the subtle art of potion making, unaware that a 20-year-old story was being written in the margins of his own life. That shop, and the real-world bookstore that inspired it, invites us into a very different kind of lore. Voldemort's choice of Horcruxes tells us something quiet but essential about his understanding of magic. He prized objects of immense historical weight, believing that by anchoring his soul to legendary artifacts, he might himself become legend. But in that same obsession with permanence and prestige, he overlooked the most ordinary vessels of power, the crumbling pages of a second-hand book, a marginal note scrawled in ink that had faded a century before he was born, a pile of parchment stacked so high it seemed to breathe with the weight of forgotten knowledge. This is the world of Flourish and Blotts, the bookstore that sits at the heart of Diagon Alley, like a library that forgot it was supposed to be quiet, and like so much of the wizarding world's best architecture, it was born from a real place. J.K. Rowling has said that the cluttered, towering, almost chaotic feel of Flourish and Blotts came directly from her own visits to bookshops in Edinburgh and London. But there is one store she returns to again and again in interviews, a place called the Oxfam Bookshop in Edinburgh, or perhaps more accurately, the many second-hand and antiquarian bookstores she haunted while writing the early novels. These were shops where books were stacked on the floor, where the shelves seemed to buckle under the weight of volumes that no one had opened in decades, where the air smelled of old paper and dust, and something like possibility. That is the sensory fingerprint of Flourish and Blotts. It is not a clean, bright, modern bookstore. It is a maze of stories waiting to be rediscovered, and this aesthetic was not accidental. The physical environment of the wizarding world is built to reflect a particular reverence for the written word. Consider how many key plot points are driven by books. The very first time Harry enters the wizarding world proper, aside from the leaky cauldron, he is taken to Gringotts and then to Diagon Alley, and in Diagon Alley, the first shop he visits for his school supplies is Flourish and Blotts. It is there he buys his standard textbooks, but it is also there that he first encounters the books that will shape his understanding of magic, from A History of Hogwarts to the Standard Book of Spells. Books are not just background decoration, they are the engine of knowledge, the primary source of power for any witch or wizard who wants to move beyond rote charm work. Think about how often characters are defined by their relationship to books. Hermione is the most obvious, but consider also the way that the Hogwarts library becomes a sanctuary and a weapon. The restricted section, the books that whisper and bite, the volumes that contain instructions for making Polyjuice Potion or summoning a Patronus. Even the Marauders map, which is itself a magical document, is first introduced as a blank piece of parchment that only reveals its secrets when you speak to it. Paper is alive in this world. Books are vessels for magic that can be passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, and this love for paper manifests in the very architecture of Flourish and Blotts. The shop is described as so crowded with books that they seem to reach the ceiling, piled in precarious towers on the floor, wedged into every available space. The owner, a man named Flourish, is never even described in detail because the shop itself is the character. The cluttered magic of that space tells you that the wizarding world values knowledge that is inherited, that is handwritten, that is bound in leather and worn with use. There is no digital age here, no e-books, no searchable databases. The only way to find the information you need is to pull a book from the shelf, open it and read. That physical act of reading becomes an act of rebellion, again and again throughout the series. When Umbridge tries to control what students learn, it is the hidden copies of the Quibbler that carry the truth. When Harry needs to understand the nature of Horcruxes, he must seek out books that Dumbledore left for him. Books that have been annotated by the old headmaster himself. The most dangerous knowledge in the wizarding world is not spoken aloud. It is written down on paper that can be hidden, passed under tables, or burned when necessary. Books are the primary source of power, because they cannot be silenced as easily as a voice. And so the real-world inspiration for Flourish and Blotts becomes more than just a charming detail. It is a reflection of how deeply Rowling believed that the written word is sacred. Those cluttered, dusty bookstores she loved, where you might find a first edition of something wonderful hidden behind a stack of gardening manuals. They are the blueprint for a world where magic is learned, not inherited. Anyone can walk into Flourish and Blotts. Anyone can pick up a book, and in that simple act, they can change the course of their own story. But there is another kind of inheritance in the wizarding world. One that is not written in books, but in blood, and that obsession with lineage. The belief that some families are more worthy than others, simply because of who their ancestors were. That is a shadow that falls across every library and every quiet reading corner. It is a tension that runs deeper than any spell, and it will surface again and again as the story unfolds. In the next chapter, we will explore how the wizarding world's fixation on blood status became its most dangerous and divisive force, an idea that nearly destroyed everything the books were meant to protect. There was something deeply comforting about the way Diagon Alley smelled of old parchment, ink, and the faint tang of magical residue clinging to every surface. Flourish and Blotts, with its towering shelves and precarious stacks, felt like a sanctuary for those who believed knowledge could be physically held, turned, and breathed in. But that world of dusty tomes and whispered secrets also housed a far more sinister kind of lore, one that had nothing to do with spells or potions, and everything to do with the ruthless mythology of blood. The obsession with blood status in the wizarding world is one of its darkest inventions, a pseudoscience dressed up in the language of ancient lineage. Pure blood families, like the Malfoys and the Blacks, clung to a narrative that magical purity was a measurable thing, something that could be diluted, tainted, or lost. The term mudblood was their most potent weapon, a slur designed to dehumanize anyone born to non-magical parents. It was a word that carried the weight of centuries of fear, a knife sharpened by the belief that magic flowed in the blood like a sacred river, and that mixing it with Muggle ancestry would poison the entire stream. But the entire foundation of that belief was built on sand. Rowling made it clear, both in the books and in later interviews, that there is no such thing as a truly pure blood family. Every line eventually produces a squib, or a marriage to a Muggle born, no matter how carefully the family tree is pruned. The Sacred 28, that infamous list of supposedly pure families, included names like the Potters, who themselves had Muggle ancestors. The whole concept was a lie, a comfortable fiction that allowed the powerful to justify cruelty with a veneer of historical legitimacy. And that brings us to the most profound irony of all. Lord Voldemort, the self-proclaimed champion of blood purity, was himself a half-blood. His mother, Merope Gaunt, came from one of the oldest pure-blood lines, but his father, Tom Riddle Sr., was a Muggle. Voldemort spent his entire life trying to erase that fact, to burn away the part of himself that he hated. He didn't just despise Muggles, he despised the Muggle inside him. That internal war, that relentless projection of self-hatred onto the world, is what made him so terrifyingly single-minded. He couldn't tolerate the impurity in others, as he couldn't tolerate it in himself. Every mudblood he killed was a symbolic murder of his own father. The Weasley family stood as the living refutation of this entire ideology. They were pure bloods by lineage, yet they were branded blood traitors by the same society that revered the concept. Arthur Weasley's fascination with Muggle plugs and rubber ducks wasn't a harmless quirk, it was an act of defiance. By embracing the mundane, the Weasleys proclaimed that blood meant nothing compared to kindness, loyalty, and the simple joy of a well-stuffed Christmas stocking. In a world obsessed with pedigree, the Weasleys became the story's ultimate moral compass. They showed that the truest magic wasn't inherited in the blood. It was chosen, day after day, in the small acts of love and sacrifice. But even the Weasleys, for all their warmth, could not shield Harry from the weight of what he was about to face. The obsession with blood was only one thread in a larger tapestry of death and choice. And soon, Harry would have to walk a path that no amount of family loyalty could illuminate. A path where the only thing waiting at the end was a forest that knew his name. And that obsession with blood status, the very thing Voldemort built his empire on, was always rooted in the deepest self-loathing. He couldn't stand the half-blood in his own veins. So he projected that hatred outward, onto a world that would never accept him the way he truly was. But the irony runs deeper than just his origin, because the moment that ultimately defeats him, the climax that every book in the series has been building toward, is not a battle of spells or a duel of wands. It is a walk into a forest. The structural necessity of Harry's sacrifice was woven into the fabric of the story from the very first chapter. Think back to that night in Godric's Hollow, when Lily Potter stood between her son and the killing curse. She was given a choice. Voldemort offered to let her live if she stepped aside. She refused. That act of willing, conscious self-sacrifice created an ancient magic, a protection that rebounded the curse and marked Harry as its equal. But that magic only worked because it was a choice freely made. It was not a spell cast in desperation. It was a decision made in love. Now, 17 years later, Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest. He knows what awaits him. He has seen the truth in the Pensieve. He has understood Dumbledore's plan, and he has accepted that he must die to destroy the Horcrux inside him. But here is the crucial difference. Harry is not being killed by someone else's hand. He is walking toward death willingly, just as his mother did. And because he does so without trying to fight, without using magic to defend himself, the same protection is triggered again. But this time, the protection works in a different way. It does not just shield Harry from Voldemort's curse, it extends to everyone on his side. The moment he steps into the clearing and Voldemort casts the killing curse, Harry's willingness to die has already created a shield around the entire army of Hogwarts. That is why, later in the battle, when spells fly and curses are thrown, the defenders are protected in a way that Voldemort cannot understand. He has repeatedly broken every magical law, fractured his soul, and yet he never grasped the one fundamental truth. Power gained through fear and murder is brittle. Power born of sacrifice is unbreakable. This moment in the forest is not just the emotional climax of the 7-book journey. It is the narrative fulfillment of a promise made in Chapter 1. From the moment we learn that love defeated the Dark Lord, we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. How could a baby survive a killing curse? The answer is not a complicated magical theory. It is the simplest magic there is, and in the forest, Harry repeats that magic. He becomes the willing victim, the one who accepts death without resistance, and in doing so, he shatters the very foundation of Voldemort's power. The walk itself is a quiet, almost meditative journey. The forest is dark, the trees are ancient, and the sounds of the battle fade behind him. He has his friends, but he sends them away. He uses the Resurrection Stone to summon his parents Sirius and Lupin, not for protection but for comfort. They walk with him, invisible to the enemy, as he makes his way to the clearing. There is no grand speech, no last-minute heroics. He simply arrives and he is killed. And that is the point. Harry's victory is not won by fighting. It is won by surrendering. It is won by choosing to die so that others might live. Every Horcrux hunt, every battle, every loss leads to this single moment of quiet acceptance. And because it was planned from the first chapter, because the story was always about the power of sacrificial love, the narrative lands with a weight that no final duel could ever match. The Battle of Hogwarts is the fireworks. The walk into the forest is the silent, enduring truth at the heart of the entire series. When Harry wakes in King's Cross, when he speaks with Dumbledore's ghost, he learns that his choice has undone everything Voldemort tried to achieve. The Horcrux is gone, but Harry is still alive because he was the master of the Elder Wand, and because his sacrifice created a loophole that death could not hold. That moment is the pivot point of the entire wizarding world. The instant when the old order of fear and blood purity finally cracks open, and in the aftermath, when the battle ends and the victors begin to rebuild. The legacy of that night, the 28th day of April in 1998, will shape everything that comes next. The way the wizarding world remembers the war, the way it treats its heroes, the way it confronts its own history of prejudice. All of it begins with a boy who walked into a forest because it was the right thing to do. That is the story we will carry forward into the quiet years that follow the fire. Harry walked into the forest knowing he would not come out, and yet the victory that followed was not simply the defeat of Voldemort. It reshaped the entire architecture of the wizarding world in ways that would echo for decades. You see, the war ended on the 2nd of May, 1998, but the real work began the next morning. The Ministry of Magic had been hollowed out, infiltrated, and turned into an instrument of terror under Voldemort's regime. Many of its most senior officials were dead, imprisoned, or had fled. The few who remained loyal had been forced into hiding or had worked in quiet resistance. In those first days after the battle, the survivors faced a question that had no easy answer. How do you rebuild a government when the very idea of trust has been shattered? The long-term effects of the war on wizarding institutions were profound. The ministry had always been a deeply flawed bureaucracy, prone to denial, corruption, and a stubborn refusal to change. But the war exposed the cost of that stagnation. The Death Eaters had taken control because too many people had looked the other way, because blood status had been allowed to fester as a political weapon, because the ministry had actively persecuted those who spoke the truth. So reform came, not all at once but steadily. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who had been a key figure in the Order of the Phoenix, was appointed Minister for Magic, and under his leadership, the ministry began a long process of dismantling the old systems of prejudice. The policies that had targeted Muggle-borns were repealed. Azkaban was reformed, no longer guarded solely by Dementors, creatures that fed on despair and had been too easily turned against the innocent. Instead, auras and magical safeguards were put in place to hold the truly dangerous, while offering rehabilitation where possible. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement was overhauled. Arthur Weasley, long a voice for Muggle protection and common sense, rose to a position of real influence. The misused powers of the Inquisition, the whimsical cruelty of Umbridge, the poison of pure blood ideology, these were no longer quietly tolerated. They were publicly confronted. But institutional reform is slow, and the scars of the war ran deep. The wizarding world had lost so many. Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Fred Weasley, Colin Creevey, and countless others whose names never made the front page of the Daily Prophet. The grief was communal, but it also became a foundation. People remembered, they built memorials, they told the stories, and that collective memory became a guardrail against forgetting. Then comes the epilogue, 19 years later. It's the autumn of 2017, and Harry and Ginny sending their youngest son, Albus Severus, off to Hogwarts for the first time. Ron and Hermione are there with their own children. Draco Malfoy nods to Harry at the station. The world has moved on, but that scene closes the loop in a way that is often overlooked. The timeline of the series began with Harry as a baby in 1980, marked by Voldemort's attack, and now, in 2017, the next generation stepping onto the same platform, into the same castle, carrying the same legacy but without the weight of war. The threat is gone. The scars remain, but they are healing. Albus Severus Potter is named for two men who died to give him that peaceful future. Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape, and Harry tells him that his sorting does not define his worth. It is a quiet, ordinary moment, and that is precisely the point. The loop closes because the story that began with a prophecy and a murder ends with a father reassuring his son on a train platform. It is a victory not of armies, but of love and normalcy. The wizarding world, for all its magic, had finally learned what it meant to live without fear. And that is why these 28 facts, these scattered pieces of lore from the books, from Rowling's notes, from the history of Hogwarts and the Ministry and the Hallows, they are not just trivia, they are the bedrock of a cultural phenomenon, because they are grounded in something real. The Deathly Hallows are not just magical objects, they are metaphors for how we face death. The Marauders map is not just a clever tool, it is a monument to friendship and loss. The Horcruxes are not just dark magic, they are a warning about the cost of refusing to let go. Every fact we have explored in this journey connects to the larger architecture of a world that feels alive, because it is built on grief, hope, and the messy struggle to be better. The legacy of 1998 is not that Voldemort fell, it is that the wizarding world chose to rise, to reform, and to remember. And so, as we reach the end of these 28 chapters, we find ourselves back where we started, with a boy who lived, and a world that learned to live alongside him. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective, or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.